Clara Whitmore's world shattered with those 6 words. Her own brother had gambled her away like cattle to Victor Hale, a man who collected broken women the way others collected land. In 1887 Wyoming, a woman alone had 2 choices: submit or starve. Clara refused both. But when a stranger with cold eyes and colder steel stepped from the shadows, offering a third option, she learned that salvation always comes with a price. This is her story. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Clara's fight for freedom reaches. And if this story grabs you, hit that like button. Now, let's begin. The whiskey-soaked air of the Broken Spur Saloon clung to Clara's dress like a warning she should have heeded hours ago. But Tommy, her worthless, gambling-addicted brother, had sent word through one of Hale's men that it was urgent, and fool that she was, she'd come running. Now she stood in the doorway, watching her only living family across a room thick with cigar smoke and bad decisions. Tommy Whitmore sat slumped at a corner table, his boyish face slick with sweat despite the October chill creeping through the warped floorboards. 24 years old, and he looked 50. Across from him, Victor Hale leaned back in his chair like a king surveying a disappointing subject, his tailored vest straining slightly over a prosperous belly. Everything about Hale screamed money, from his oiled hair to his polished boots to the gold watch chain that caught the lamplight with every breath. Clara knew that watch. Everybody in Pine Ridge knew it. Hale checked it before he foreclosed on property, before he had someone beaten, before he made offers nobody refused. He was checking it now. "Miss Whitmore?" Hale's voice carried across the room without him raising it. Men just naturally shut up when Victor Hale spoke. "So good of you to join us. Your brother and I were just discussing his financial situation." Clara's stomach dropped, but she kept her chin up as she crossed the saloon floor. Years of teaching school had taught her that showing fear to bullies, whether they were 10 years old or 50, only made things worse. What has he done now? She didn't look at Tommy. Couldn't. If she looked at him, she might actually strangle him, and that wouldn't help either of them. $23,000. Hale's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing ever did. Accumulated over 6 months of very optimistic poker playing. I've been patient, Miss Whitmore, extremely patient, but patience, like everything else, has a price. The number hit Clara like a physical blow. 23,000. Their parents' house, the one Tommy had inherited because God forbid a woman own property, wasn't worth half that. She'd been saving her teacher's salary for 3 years and had maybe $200 to her name. "Tommy," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Tell me he's lying." Her brother finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a bruise blooming purple along his jaw that hadn't been there yesterday. "Clara, I thought I could win it back. I had a system. I just needed one more." "He mortgaged the house," Hale interrupted, bored with Tommy's excuses. 6 weeks ago, as collateral against his debts, the house, the land, and all contents therein. He paused, letting that sink in. Unfortunately, the property appraises at $11,000, which leaves us with a rather substantial gap, doesn't it? Clara's throat closed. The house. Their parents' house. The only thing standing between her and complete destitution, and Tommy had gambled it away like it meant nothing. "You can't," she started, but Hale cut her off with a raised hand. "Legal documents, Miss Whitmore, signed and witnessed. I can, and I have." He pulled out his watch, checked it, tucked it away. "Which brings us to tonight's discussion. Your brother, resourceful fellow that he is, has proposed an alternative arrangement." Something cold slithered down Clara's spine. "What arrangement?" Tommy couldn't meet her eyes. "Clara, you have to understand." "What arrangement?" Hale's smile widened. "You, Miss Whitmore, in exchange for dissolving your brother's debt and returning the deed to your family home, you would become Mrs. Victor Hale. I'm a widower, as you know. I require a wife of appropriate breeding and education. You require security. It's actually quite practical when you think about it." The room tilted. Claire grabbed the back of a nearby chair, her knuckles white against the scarred wood. "You're insane. I'm a businessman." Hale's voice remained pleasant, conversational. "Your brother made a deal. I'm simply offering him, and you, a way to honor it." "A deal he had no right to make," Clara's voice cracked. Several men at the bar turned to look, then quickly found somewhere else to point their eyes. Nobody interfered with Victor Hale's business, not if they valued their livelihood or their lives. Right or wrong isn't really the issue, my dear. Hale stood, smoothing down his vest. The issue is $23,000. Now you can accept my proposal, and I assure you, you'll want for nothing as my wife. Or I can foreclose on the property tomorrow morning. Your brother will likely end up in debtor's prison, or more probably face down in some alley when my associates come to collect what's owed. And you? He shrugged. Well, a woman alone in Pine Ridge has limited prospects, especially one with no home and no family. Clara looked at Tommy. Really looked at him, her baby brother, who used to catch fireflies in jars and cried when their mother died. The brother who'd promised, sworn on their father's grave, that he'd take care of things. Take care of her. Please, Tommy whispered. Clara, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But if you don't, he'll kill me. You know he will. She did know. That's what made it worse. Victor Hale had killed before. Oh, nothing anyone could prove in court, but Pine Ridge had buried 3 men in the past 2 years who'd crossed Hale over money. The sheriff, Hale's brother-in-law, had ruled all 3 deaths accidental. How long do I have? Claire's voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking through her mouth. Until midnight tomorrow. Hale pulled out a folded document, set it on the table. The marriage contract. Very fair terms, I assure you. You'll have a generous monthly allowance, appropriate clothing, a position in society. All I ask in return is your companionship, your discretion, and your obedience. That last word hung in the air like a noose. And if I refuse? Hale's pleasantness evaporated like morning frost. Then I collect what I'm owed, Miss Whitmore, one way or another, and your brother's debt will be paid in blood, if not in coin. He headed for the door, then paused. Midnight tomorrow, the courthouse. I'll have the minister waiting. He left. Just walked out like he'd been discussing the weather, not buying a human being like livestock at auction. Clara stood frozen, staring at the contract on the table. Her hands shook. Her whole body shook. Clara! Tommy reached for her arm. She jerked away. Don't touch me. I didn't mean... I thought I could fix it. You thought? Clara's laugh came out broken, jagged. You didn't think at all. You never do. Daddy left you that house because you're a man, because that's how it works. And you pissed it away in 6 months. 6 months, Tommy. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry? She whirled on him. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you just sold me to a man who's had 3 wives and they've all died under mysterious circumstances. Sorry doesn't... Her voice cracked. She pressed a hand to her mouth, forcing back the scream building in her chest. Maybe it won't be that bad, Tommy offered weakly. Hale's rich. You'll have nice things. Better than teaching school for pennies. Clara stared at her brother. Really stared. And in that moment she understood with perfect clarity that Tommy Whitmore would always choose the easy path, would always find someone else to pay for his mistakes, would always put himself first. She'd lost her brother years ago. She just hadn't wanted to see it. Get out of my sight, she whispered. Clara, get out. Tommy stood, hesitated, then shuffled toward the door. He paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. Clara didn't respond, didn't turn around, just stood there listening to his footsteps fade, then disappear completely. The bartender, a grizzled man named Frank who'd known her father, approached cautiously. Miss Whitmore, can I get you something? Water, maybe? Whiskey. She'd never drunk whiskey in her life. Seemed like a good time to start. Frank poured her a glass without comment. Clara downed it in one burning gulp, gasped, then pushed the glass back. Another. Miss Whitmore. Another Frank. He poured. She drank. The third one she sipped, letting the burn settle into something almost manageable. The saloon had nearly emptied now. Nobody wanted to be around when Victor Hale's business concluded. Just a few die-hard drunks at the bar and a poker game in the far corner where men spoke in low voices and kept their eyes on their cards. Clara picked up the marriage contract. Her hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a strange numbness that felt almost like calm. She read it by lamplight, even though she knew it didn't matter. Hale would do what Hale wanted, contract or no contract. The wife agrees to maintain the household, entertain guests as required, and submit to her husband's authority in all matters domestic and financial. Submit. There was that word again. The husband agrees to provide suitable housing, clothing, and a monthly allowance of $50 for personal expenses. $50. More than she made in 3 months teaching. All she had to do was surrender every shred of autonomy, marry a man who looked at her like property, and pray she didn't become wife number 4 in the Pine Ridge Cemetery. She read the whole thing, every word, not because she thought she'd find a loophole, but because she wanted to remember exactly what her freedom was worth, exactly what Tommy had sold her for. $23,000. The price of a life. Clara set the contract down, pressed her palms against the scarred table surface. Think. She had to think. There had to be another way. She could run, take what money she had and catch the morning train to Cheyenne, maybe find work as a domestic. But Hale had people everywhere. And Tommy would still be here, still owe the debt. Hale would make an example of him, and as much as she hated her brother right now, she didn't want his death on her conscience. She could go to the sheriff. Ha! Sheriff Morrison would laugh in her face. Everyone knew he was in Hale's pocket. She could, what? What options did a 22-year-old schoolteacher have against the richest man in 3 counties? Miss Whitmore. Clara's head snapped up. A man stood beside her table. Not approached, just stood, like he'd materialized from the shadows themselves. Tall, maybe 30, dressed in dark wool and worn leather, trail dust still clinging to his coat. He had the kind of face that gave nothing away, hard angles, weathered skin, eyes the color of winter clouds. She'd never seen him before. She was sure of that. You didn't forget a face like that. I'm not interested in company, Clara said shortly. Not offering company? His voice matched his face, rough, quiet, with an edge that suggested he didn't waste words. Offering a solution. I know what Hale wants, heard the whole thing. He pulled out the chair across from her, sat without asking permission. Up close, Claire could see the details her first glance had missed. The Colt revolver on his hip, worn smooth from use, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the way his eyes constantly tracked the room, noting exits, threats, possibilities. Name's Cole Barrett. Good for you. Clara reached for her whiskey glass. Mr. Barrett, I appreciate whatever you think you're doing, but I'll pay the debt. Her hand froze halfway to the glass. What? $23,000. I'll pay it. Tonight. He said it like he was discussing the price of feed grain. On one condition. Clara's laugh came out bitter. Of course, there's always a condition, isn't there? What do you want? Same arrangement as Hale, just with a different name. Something flickered across Barrett's face. Annoyance, maybe, or offense. But his voice remained level. I want you to marry me instead. That's the same. For 1 year. He kept talking like she hadn't interrupted. Contract marriage. Equal terms. You keep your own money, make your own decisions. I need a wife for legal reasons. You need a way out. After a year, we dissolve the marriage. You walk away free and clear. Clara stared at him. You're insane. Probably. His mouth almost smiled. Almost. But I'm solvent, and I'm not Victor Hale, which makes me the best option you're going to get before midnight tomorrow. I don't even know you. And you know Hale. Barrett leaned back, studying her. I know what you're thinking. Strange man, strange offer, probably just as bad as the devil, you know. But here's the thing, Miss Whitmore. I don't want obedience. I don't want submission. I want a legal wife for exactly 1 year so I can claim a property inheritance that requires marital status. After that, you're free to go wherever you want. Why me? Claire's head was spinning. Too much whiskey, too much shock, too many impossible choices. You could ask any woman in town. Could, won't. He tilted his head slightly. Heard about you? School teacher, smart, independent, exactly the kind of woman who'd honor a contract and not develop romantic notions about a business arrangement. You heard about me? Claire's voice dripped skepticism. From who? You're not from Pine Ridge. No, I'm from a ranch about 40 miles north. Been trying to claim my grandfather's land for 6 months, but there's an old stipulation in the will I have to be married to inherit. Old man had traditional ideas about family. Barrett's expression darkened briefly. Anyway, I've been looking for someone practical, someone who'd see the sense in a mutually beneficial arrangement. And you just happened to be in the Broken Spur tonight when my brother sold me off? That's quite a coincidence. Heard about it yesterday. Man named Pete, who works for Hale, drinks too much and talks more. He mentioned a school teacher with a gambling brother and a debt coming due. Barrett shrugged. Figured I'd come see if the situation presented an opportunity. Clara should have been offended. Should have thrown her remaining whiskey in his face and stormed out. But something in Barrett's straightforward approach, his complete lack of pretense, made her pause. He wasn't pretending this was romance, wasn't dressing it up as rescue or chivalry, just business, cold, practical business. Somehow that felt more honest than anything else tonight. Let me see if I understand, she said slowly. You pay my brother's debt to Hale. I marry you instead. We live together for 1 year as, what, exactly? Husband and wife? Legally, yes. Practically business partners. Barrett pulled out his own folded document. Apparently everyone came prepared tonight, and spread it on the table. I had a lawyer draw this up. You keep your own finances, sleep in your own room, make your own choices. All I need is your signature on legal documents and your presence at social occasions where a wife is expected. After 1 year, we file for divorce or annulment. You take a settlement of $5,000, and we go our separate ways. $5,000. Enough to start over anywhere. Enough to be truly independent. Clara picked up the contract. This one was different from Hale's, simpler, clearer. No mentions of obedience or submission, just terms, expectations, an end date. Why should I trust you? She asked. You shouldn't. Barrett's honesty was almost refreshing. You don't know me. For all you know, I'm lying about everything. But you don't have to trust me, Miss Whitmore. You just have to trust that piece of paper. Legal contract, witnessed and binding. If I violate the terms, you take me to court and you'll win. I've got the land, the assets, you'd be protected. Unless you kill me first, like Hale's wives. Then you'd better hope I'm not a killer. He stood. Look, I know this is a hell of a choice. Marry a stranger or marry a monster. But I'm offering you an out, a real one. 1 year of your time for your freedom and enough money to build whatever life you want afterward. Clara looked at the contract, looked at Barrett's scarred, unreadable face, looked at Hale's contract still sitting on the table with its clauses about submission and obedience. I need to think, she whispered. You've got until noon tomorrow. I'll be at the church. You show up, we do this. You don't, I ride north, and you marry Hale at midnight. Barrett headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Whitmore, I heard you're a good teacher, patient, fair. I could use someone like that managing a household, and I keep my word. He left before she could respond. Clara sat alone at the table, 2 contracts in front of her, whiskey burning in her empty stomach, and the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on her shoulders. The saloon's clock ticked toward midnight. Somewhere in the darkness, Victor Hale was probably already planning the wedding, picking out which dress she'd wear, which room she'd occupy in his sprawling house on the hill. Clara closed her eyes. Think. But there was nothing to think about. Not really. The choice had been made the moment Tommy sat down at a poker table 6 months ago and started throwing away money he didn't have. She'd just been too blind to see it until now. She could marry Hale and lose herself completely. Or she could marry Barrett and gamble on a stranger's word. Some choice. Clara picked up both contracts, folded them carefully, and tucked them into her bag. Then she stood, left money on the table for the whiskey, and walked out into the October night. The streets of Pine Ridge were mostly dark, just a few lights flickering in windows where people lived their normal, uncomplicated lives. Clara walked past the schoolhouse where she'd taught for 3 years, past the boarding house where she rented a room for $2 a week, past the church where, one way or another, she'd be standing tomorrow. She should sleep, should try to rest, make a clear-headed decision in the morning. Instead, she walked to the cemetery. Her parents were buried side by side near the back, under a cottonwood tree her father had planted when Clara was born. She knelt between their graves, pressed her palms against the cold earth. I don't know what to do, she whispered. Daddy, you left everything to Tommy because that's how it's supposed to work. But he ruined it. Ruined everything. And now I have to choose between 2 men I don't know, and either way I lose something I can't get back. The wind rustled through the cottonwood leaves. No answer came. Dead men couldn't offer advice. Mama, You always said to trust my instincts, that a woman's intuition was worth more than any man's logic. Clara's voice cracked. But my instincts are screaming at me to run, and I can't. There's nowhere to go, nothing to run to. She sat there until the cold seeped through her skirts, until her legs cramped and her hands went numb. Then she stood, brushed the dirt from her dress, and made her decision. Not because it was the right choice. There wasn't a right choice. But because she'd rather gamble on a stranger's contract than surrender to Hale's certainty. The next morning, Clara packed her life into 2 carpet bags, clothes, books, her mother's silver brush, the photograph of her parents on their wedding day. Everything she owned in the world fit into 2 bags with room to spare. It should have felt pathetic. Instead, it felt freeing. She left the boarding house without saying goodbye to Mrs. Henderson, walked past the schoolhouse without stopping to collect her things from the desk. None of it mattered anymore. That life was over. The church sat at the end of Main Street, small and white, with a bell tower that hadn't worked in 5 years. Clara pushed open the door just before noon. Cole Barrett stood at the altar, talking quietly with a man Clara recognized as Judge Morrison, the sheriff's father, and one of the few officials in Pine Ridge who wasn't completely in Hale's pocket. Barrett had cleaned up since last night. Fresh shirt, pressed pants, hair combed back. He looked almost respectable. He also looked unsurprised when Clara walked down the aisle. "Miss Whitmore." He nodded, formal as a business meeting. "Glad you came." "Don't be." Clara set her bags down, pulled out his contract. "This is a transaction. Let's not pretend it's anything else." "Fair enough." Barrett turned to the judge. "You have the money?" Judge Morrison held up a bank draft. $23,000 made out to Victor Hale, as requested. Mr. Barrett signed it this morning. Clara stared at the slip of paper. That was it. That was the price of her freedom. Or her next prison. Hard to tell which. "Your brother's outside," Barrett said. "Figured you'd want to see the debt paid before we proceed." Of course, Tommy was outside, probably pacing, waiting to see if his sister would actually save his worthless neck. Clara nodded. "Let's get this over with." They walked out together. Tommy stood on the church steps, looking like he hadn't slept. Next to him, somehow even more imposing in daylight, Victor Hale examined his watch. "Miss Whitmore." Hale's smile was oil-slick smooth. "I'm delighted you've come to your senses. The dress I've selected for you is... She's not marrying you." Barrett's voice cut through Hale's words like a blade. "I'm paying the debt, in full. Now." Hale's smile froze. "I beg your pardon?" "The debt." Barrett handed the bank draft to Judge Morrison. $23,000. Witnessed and notarized. Tommy Whitmore's obligation is satisfied. For the first time since Clara had known him, Victor Hale looked genuinely surprised. Then the surprise curdled into something uglier. "That debt," he said softly, "came with certain arrangements. Arrangements you made without Miss Whitmore's consent." Judge Morrison's voice carried unexpected steel. "I've reviewed the contract, Victor. It's not legal. You can't bind someone to marriage as collateral without their signature. You tried to coerce her. That won't stand in any court." Hale's face darkened. "This is preposterous. The brother signed." "The brother doesn't own his sister." Barrett stepped forward, and Clara saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "The debt's paid. The contract's void. Miss Whitmore's free to make her own choice." "And I choose him," Clara said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "I'm marrying Mr. Barrett. Today. Right now." The silence that followed felt like standing on a frozen lake, waiting for the ice to crack. Hale looked at Clara. Really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe?" Clara met his stare. "But it's my mistake to make." Something cold slithered across Hale's face. Not anger, but calculation. "Mr. Barrett, I don't believe we've been introduced. Where exactly did you say your ranch was located?" "Didn't say." Barrett's voice stayed level. 40 miles north. Interesting. Because I happen to own considerable property north of here, and I don't recall a Barrett family in that area." "You wouldn't. My grandfather kept to himself." "Your grandfather?" Hale's smile returned, sharp as broken glass. "How fascinating. You know, I make it my business to know who owns what land around Pine Ridge. Family trees, property lines, water rights, and I've never heard of any Barretts with inheritance claims. Then you haven't been paying attention. The two men stared at each other. Clara could feel the tension coiling between them, tight as a spring. I'll find out, Hale said quietly. Whatever you're playing at, Mr. Barrett, I'll find out. And when I do, he turned to Clara. Well, I'm a patient man, Miss Whitmore. I can wait. And when this arrangement falls apart, as it inevitably will, I'll still be here. He walked away, just turned and walked down Main Street like he owned it, which Clara supposed he basically did. Tommy stepped forward. Clara, don't. She couldn't look at him, wouldn't. You have what you wanted. The debt's paid. Now leave. I just want to say, leave, Tommy. Her brother stood there a moment longer, then slunk away like a kicked dog. Clara watched him go, felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a vast, hollow emptiness where her family used to be. You all right? Barrett's voice was quiet. No. Clara turned to face him. But I will be. Let's finish this. They went back inside. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony. Short, practical, no flourishes. Clara spoke her vows in a voice that didn't shake. Barrett slid a plain gold band onto her finger. Nothing fancy, just a circle of metal that felt heavier than it looked. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Just like that. Clara Whitmore became Clara Barrett. Changed her whole life in less time than it took to teach a spelling lesson. Barrett kissed her cheek, brief, formal, almost brotherly. Thank you, he said quietly. Clara didn't respond. Couldn't. The weight of what she'd just done was starting to sink in, and if she opened her mouth, she might scream. I have a wagon outside, Barrett continued. We should leave before Hale decides to make trouble. My things, already loaded. He'd taken her bags from the church. Efficient, prepared. Clara couldn't decide if that was reassuring or terrifying. They walked out to find a sturdy wagon hitched to two horses. Clara's carpetbags already secured in the back next to supplies, food, water, blankets, rifles. Barrett had come prepared for a journey, or a siege. He helped her onto the seat, his hand steady, impersonal, then climbed up beside her, took the reins. Last chance, he said. You can still walk away. I'll give you the money anyway. $5,000, no strings. You can disappear, start over somewhere Hale can't reach you. Clara looked at Pine Ridge, the town where she'd been born, grown up, buried both parents. The place that had been her whole world until yesterday. It had never felt smaller. Drive, she said. Barrett nodded, snapped the reins, and just like that, Clara Barrett left her old life behind. They rode in silence through the afternoon, the wagon jolting over ruts in the road, Pine Ridge shrinking behind them until it disappeared completely. The landscape opened up. Rolling hills, scattered pines, the mountains rising blue-gray in the distance. Beautiful country. Empty country. Clara had never been more than 10 miles from Pine Ridge in her life. How far is your ranch? She asked finally, more to break the silence than from real curiosity. Another 6 hours. We'll make camp before dark. Arrive tomorrow morning. And this grandfather of yours, the one who left you the property. Dead 3 years. Barrett kept his eyes on the road. Old bastard cut me out of his will when I was 16 because I wouldn't follow his rules. Then had a change of heart on his deathbed and amended it with that marriage clause. His way of controlling me even from the grave. Charming family trait. Barrett's mouth almost smiled. Yeah, well, apparently forcing choices on people runs in the blood. Clara pulled her shawl tighter against the October wind. This contract of ours, you really meant what you said? Separate rooms, separate lives. I really meant it. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I've seen what happens when men treat women like property. My grandfather treated my grandmother like a servant. My father treated my mother like a piece of furniture. Both women died young and miserable. His jaw tightened. I won't be them, and you deserve better than what Hale would have given you. You don't even know me. Don't need to. Anyone with eyes could see you're smart, capable, and trapped. Figured we could help each other. He glanced at her. Unless you'd rather I made pretty speeches about love and destiny? God, no. The honest answer surprised a laugh out of her. I've had enough lies for one lifetime. Then we'll stick to truth, even when it's uncomfortable. They rode on. The sun tracked west, throwing long shadows across the prairie. Clara watched the landscape change. Fewer trees, more grass, the road narrowing to barely a trail. This was wild country, the kind of place where people disappeared and nobody asked questions. She should have been terrified. Probably was, underneath the numbness. Instead, she felt something strange, something that might have been hope, if she'd let herself believe in such things. "Mr. Barrett," she started. "Cole?" He said it like an order. "We're married, might as well use first names." "Cole, then. What happens if this doesn't work? If we can't stand each other for a year? Then we'll be miserable together for a year and part ways richer and wiser." He shrugged. "But I'm betting we'll manage. You're practical, so am I. We'll figure it out." Practical. That's what she was. Not brave, not romantic, not any of the things heroines in novels were supposed to be. Just practical. Clara decided that was fine. Practical had gotten her this far. Practical might get her through the rest. The sun was setting when Cole pulled the wagon off the trail into a sheltered spot near a creek. "We'll camp here tonight. I've got bedrolls, food. Not fancy, but it'll do." He moved with practiced efficiency, unhitching the horses, building a fire, setting up camp like he'd done it 1,000 times. Probably had. Clara helped where she could, feeling useless and out of place. "You know how to shoot?" Cole asked, holding out one of the rifles. "No. I'll teach you tomorrow. Out here, it's useful." He said it like it was normal, like teaching your brand new wife to handle firearms was just another item on the wedding day agenda. They ate beans and hardtack in silence, the fire crackling between them. Clara had 1,000 questions. Where had Cole learned to move like that? Silent, aware, dangerous. What had he done before this? Why had his grandfather really cut him out of the will? But she was too tired to ask, too overwhelmed, too everything. "You should sleep," Cole said, reading her expression. "It's safe here. I'll keep watch." "You don't have to." "I know, but I will anyway." "Old habits." Clara didn't argue. She took the bedroll he offered, wrapped herself in blankets that smelled like sage and wood smoke, and lay down under more stars than she'd ever seen in her life. She should have felt exposed, vulnerable, afraid. Instead, for the first time in days, she felt something almost like peace. Tomorrow she'd worry about the future, about whether she'd made the right choice, about what kind of man she'd actually married. Tonight she was free of Victor Hale, free of Pine Ridge, free of a life that had been slowly suffocating her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Clara closed her eyes, listened to the creek murmuring and the fire popping and the quiet sounds of Cole moving around camp, and let herself sleep. Tomorrow would come soon enough. And whatever it brought, she'd face it. She didn't have any other choice. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of horses stamping in the pre-dawn cold. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. The stars overhead were too bright, the air too sharp, the ground too hard beneath her. Then memory crashed back. The wedding, the wagon. Cole Barrett, her husband. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like speaking a language she'd only read in books. Cole crouched by the fire, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. He'd already packed most of the camp, the bedrolls tied and ready, the horses saddled. How long had she slept? The sky was barely gray, dawn still an hour away. "Coffee?" He held out a cup without looking at her. Clara sat up, her back aching from the hard ground, and accepted the cup. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, black as sin, and absolutely perfect. She wrapped her hands around the warm metal and took a cautious sip. "What time is it?" 4:30, give or take. Cole dumped the rest of the coffee on the fire, watching the embers hiss and die. "Want to get an early start. Should make the ranch by noon if we don't run into trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Out here? Could be anything. Weather, bandits, broken axle?" He shrugged, already moving to finish breaking camp. "Probably nothing. But I don't like traveling after dark in unfamiliar territory." Clara noticed he said unfamiliar, not dangerous, but she wasn't stupid enough to miss the implication. She drained her coffee, wincing at the bitter dregs, and stood. Her legs felt like someone had beaten them with sticks. "You'll get used to it," Cole said, reading her expression. "The riding, the sleeping rough. Give it a week or so." "A week?" Right. Because this was her life now. Camping under stars, drinking paint thinner coffee, traveling through country where trouble could mean getting robbed or killed or worse. What the hell had she done? But the alternative had been Victor Hale, and even exhausted and sore and terrified, Clara knew she'd made the right choice, or at least the least wrong one. They were on the road before sunrise, the wagon creaking and swaying over ruts that seemed deliberately designed to break a person's spine. Clara gripped the seat, trying not to look like she was holding on for dear life, while Cole drove with the easy competence of someone who'd been doing this since childhood. The landscape grew rougher as they traveled north. Fewer trees, more rocks, the mountains looming closer with every mile. Beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The kind of country that didn't care about your problems or your survival. You either adapted or you died. Tell me about the ranch, Clara said, more to distract herself from the jolting than from real curiosity. Not much to tell. 200 acres, mostly grazing land. House, barn, some outbuildings. Creek runs through the property, so there's water year-round. Cole's voice stayed flat, factual. Been empty 3 years since my grandfather died. I've had a couple of men keeping an eye on it, making sure squatters don't move in, but it needs work. What kind of work? The kind that takes money and time. He glanced at her. Fair warning, it's not fancy, not like what you're used to in town. Clara almost laughed. I lived in a boarding house room the size of a closet and taught school for $20 a month. My standards aren't exactly high. Good, because the house has 4 rooms, a leaky roof, and furniture my grandfather built in 1840. Also, the nearest neighbor is 12 miles east, and the nearest town is Pine Ridge, which we just left. Isolated, that's what he was saying. They'd be completely isolated. Clara should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange sense of relief. No neighbors meant no gossip. No town meant no Victor Hale, just empty land and hard work and space to breathe. I can handle it, she said. Cole nodded like he'd expected nothing less. What about you? What do you need to know? Need to know? About me. The arrangement. What happens when we get there? He kept his eyes on the road. You've got questions. Might as well ask them now instead of wondering. Clara considered. She had about 1,000 questions, but most of them boiled down to one thing. Who exactly had she married? Why did your grandfather really cut you out? She asked. You said you wouldn't follow his rules, but that could mean anything. Cole was quiet for so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I left. When I was 16, I left. Told him I wasn't going to spend my life breaking my back on land that was never going to be mine, following orders from a man who thought respect meant fear. His jaw tightened. He gave me a choice, stay and submit or leave and lose everything. So I left. And did what? Worked. Cattle drives mostly. Sometimes ranch hand work. Sometimes hired gun when the money was good enough. He said it like it was nothing, but Clara heard the weight behind the words. Hired gun. That meant violence, probably killing. And you came back because of the inheritance. Came back because I'm tired. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Tired of moving, tired of watching my back, tired of having nothing. My grandfather's dead. The land's mine if I meet the conditions. So here I am, with a wife you bought for $23,000. I didn't buy you. Cole's voice went sharp. I paid your brother's debt. There's a difference. Is there? Clara turned to look at him properly. You gave money, got a wife. Sounds like buying to me. You signed the contract of your own free will. You can leave any time you want. I put that in writing. That's not buying. That's negotiating. He met her stare. And if you don't see the difference between what I did and what Hale tried to do, then you're not as smart as I thought you were. The words stung, partly because they were harsh, partly because they were true. Cole had given her a choice, a real one. That he'd framed it as business didn't change the fact that he'd offered her freedom, not a cage. You're right, Clara said quietly. I'm sorry. Cole blinked, clearly not expecting the apology. Forget it. You've had a rough couple of days. You're entitled to being angry. I'm not angry at you. No, but I'm here, and the people you're actually angry at aren't close enough. He returned his attention to the road. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. This is business. You pull your weight, I'll pull mine. We're partners, not master and servant. You have a problem with how I do something, you tell me. We'll work it out. Partners. The word settled somewhere in Clara's chest, warm and unexpected. She'd never been anyone's partner before. Her father had made decisions, her mother had followed them. Tommy had inherited everything and expected Clara to just accept it. Even teaching, she'd been subordinate to the school board, to parents, to everyone. Being an equal partner sounded exhausting. It also sounded wonderful. What if we can't work it out, she asked. Then we'll fight about it like adults and move on. Cole almost smiled. I'm not expecting perfect harmony, Clara. I'm expecting practical cooperation. Big difference. They rode in silence after that, the sun climbing higher, the landscape growing more rugged. Clara's mind raced with everything she didn't know, everything she hadn't asked. What would she actually do at this ranch? What did Cole expect from her? How would they manage living in the same house, being legally married, without it becoming about the sleeping arrangements, Cole said, like he'd read her mind. The house has 2 bedrooms. You'll have one, I'll take the other. There's a lock on both doors if that makes you feel safer. Clara's face heated. I didn't. Yeah, you were. It's a fair concern. His voice stayed matter-of-fact. I'm not interested in forcing anything. You're my wife on paper, not in practice. Clear enough? Clear? Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic decency. That's a pretty low bar. The morning wore on. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat dried meat that tasted like leather but filled the hollow in Clara's stomach. She tried not to think about the fact that she was now completely dependent on this stranger, for food, shelter, safety, everything. That if he decided to break his word, there was nothing she could do about it. But he didn't seem like the type to break his word. Cole Barrett struck her as many things: hard, dangerous, impossibly self-contained, but not a liar. She'd have to trust that her instincts were right, and if they weren't, well, she'd survive somehow. She always had. Around 11, the landscape changed. The rocky hills gave way to a valley, still wild, still remote, but greener. A creek wound through it, lined with cottonwoods just starting to turn gold. And in the distance, nestled against the hillside, Clara saw buildings. That's it, Cole said. The Barrett Ranch. Your new home. Clara stared. The house was smaller than she'd expected. A simple structure of weathered wood with a sagging porch and, as promised, a roof that looked like it leaked in about 6 places. The barn wasn't much better, leaning slightly to one side like it was considering giving up entirely. There were a couple of other outbuildings in various states of decay, and what might have been a chicken coop, except all the chickens were long gone. It looked like the set of a tragedy play, like a place where dreams came to die. Clara loved it immediately. It's perfect, she said. Cole gave her a sharp look. You're either lying or insane. I'm serious. Look at it. Nobody's going to bother us out here. No neighbors watching every move, no gossip spreading rumors. Just work and space and quiet. She surprised herself with how much she meant it. When was the last time you lived somewhere nobody expected anything from you? Never, Cole admitted. He pulled the wagon up to the house, set the brake. But that doesn't mean I'm going to pretend this place isn't falling apart. We've got our work cut out for us. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands brief and impersonal on her waist, and Clara got her first close look at her new home. The porch steps groaned ominously under her weight. The windows were filthy, some cracked. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Inside was worse. Dust everywhere, cobwebs in the corners, furniture covered in 3 years of neglect. The kitchen had a cast iron stove that might have been impressive once, but now looked like a monument to rust. There was a table, 4 chairs, one missing a leg, and a counter scarred with decades of knife marks. The 2 bedrooms were identical, small, sparse, containing a bed frame, a dresser, and absolutely nothing else. Clara's bedroom window overlooked the creek. Cole's faced the mountains. I know it's rough, Cole said, watching her take it all in. But it's sound, good bones. We can fix the roof, replace what needs replacing. It's fine, Clara set down her carpetbags. I've lived in worse. You lived in a boarding house. A boarding house run by a woman who thought bathing was a sin and fresh air invited disease. Trust me, this is an improvement. She turned to face him. Where do we start? Cole looked at her like he was trying to figure out if she was joking. You want to start now? You just got here. And sitting around won't make the work disappear. Clara rolled up her sleeves. I'm assuming you want the roof fixed before winter. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Yeah, that's first priority. But Clara, you don't have to Partners, she interrupted. You said we're partners. That means I pull my weight. So what needs doing? For the first time since she'd met him, Cole Barrett smiled. Really smiled. Not the almost smile he'd been using. It transformed his face completely, erasing years and hardness and making him look almost boyish. All right, partner, let's get to work. They spent the afternoon cleaning. Clara tackled the house while Cole dealt with the barn and outbuildings. She swept out dust, scrubbed surfaces, beat rugs until her arms ached. It was hard, physical work, nothing like teaching school. But there was something satisfying about watching the grime disappear, revealing the bones of a house that might actually be livable. She found supplies in the kitchen, basic provisions Cole's hired men must have stocked. Flour, beans, coffee, salt pork. Not much, but enough to make a meal. Clara hadn't cooked for anyone but herself in years, but she remembered her mother's lessons. How to build a fire in the stove, how to judge heat without a thermometer, how to make something edible out of almost nothing. By the time Cole came back inside, she had beans simmering and cornbread in the oven. He stopped in the doorway, staring. You cooked. Don't sound so shocked. I'm not completely useless. Clara wiped her hands on a rag. It's nothing fancy, but it's food. I wasn't expecting... He shook his head. Thank you. They ate at the scarred kitchen table, the silence between them more comfortable than it had been that morning. The food was plain but hot, and after 2 days of trail rations, it tasted like a feast. You're good at this, Cole said eventually. At what? Cooking beans? At adapting. Most women I've known would have taken one look at this place and demanded to go back to town. He met her eyes. You didn't even hesitate. Clara shrugged. What would hesitating accomplish? This is my life now. Might as well make the best of it. Practical, Cole said, almost to himself. You keep saying that like it's a compliment. It is. He stood, collecting the dishes. I'll clean up. You should rest. Tomorrow we start on the roof, and that's going to be harder work than scrubbing floors. Clara wanted to argue, to prove she could handle cleanup too, but exhaustion was catching up with her. 2 nights of rough sleeping, a day of travel, hours of physical labor, her body was screaming for rest. All right, she conceded, but wake me if you need help with anything. Deal. She retreated to her bedroom, strange thought, and sat on the bed. The mattress was ancient and lumpy, but after sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury. Through the window, she could see the creek catching the last light, hear it murmuring over rocks. This was her home now. This falling apart ranch in the middle of nowhere, with a husband she barely knew and a future so uncertain it terrified her. But it was hers, not Hale's, not Tommy's, not anyone's, but hers and Cole's together. Clara lay back on the lumpy mattress, stared at the water-stained ceiling, and let herself feel something close to hope. The next morning, Cole woke her before dawn again. Clara groaned, every muscle in her body protesting, but she dragged herself out of bed and stumbled to the kitchen. Coffee was already brewing. Cole stood at the stove, frying salt pork. He glanced over his shoulder when she entered. Morning, you look terrible. Good morning to you too. Clara collapsed into a chair. Do you ever sleep past 4 in the morning? Not really. Old habit. He slid a plate in front of her. Pork, fried bread, the last of yesterday's beans. Eat. We've got a long day ahead. Clara ate mechanically, too tired to taste anything. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten, stars fading into gray. What are we doing today? She asked. Roof. I've got supplies in the barn. Tar paper, nails, some lumber. We'll patch the worst spots, replace what we can. It won't be pretty, but it'll keep the rain out. He paused. You ever worked on a roof before? No? Can you handle heights? I guess we'll find out. Cole's mouth twitched. That's the spirit. They spent the morning hauling supplies, setting up a ladder, assessing the damage. The roof was worse than it looked from the ground. Half the shingles were missing or rotted, and there were actual holes in 2 places. How did this place not collapse? Clara asked, staring at a gap she could fit her arm through. Luck, mostly. Cole tested a beam, frowned. And good initial construction. My grandfather was a bastard, but he built things to last. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Cole handled the actual repairs while Clara hauled materials, held things steady, learned by watching. It was hard, dangerous work. One wrong step and she could fall, break her neck, die alone on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. But it was also exhilarating. Every shingle they replaced, every hole they patched, the house became a little more theirs, a little less a relic of the past, and a little more a place they were building together. "Hand me the hammer," Cole said, balanced on the peak of the roof. Clara climbed the ladder carefully, hammer in hand. Heights didn't scare her as much as she'd expected, or maybe she was too focused on not falling to be properly terrified. She reached the top, passed him the tool. "Thanks." He drove a nail with 3 efficient strikes. "You're doing good up here. Not many people can work a roof without freezing up." "I'm terrified," Clara admitted. "I'm just stubborn enough to not let it stop me." Cole laughed, an actual laugh, surprised and genuine. "Yeah, I'm getting that about you." They worked until the light started to fail, then climbed down carefully and surveyed their progress. The roof still looked rough, but it was solid. No more holes. No more obvious disaster waiting to happen. "Not bad for a day's work," Cole said. "We'll finish tomorrow, then move on to the barn." Clara nodded, too exhausted to speak. Every part of her hurt. Her hands were blistered despite the gloves Cole had given her. Her back ached. Her legs felt like water. But they'd done it. They'd actually done it. Inside, she heated water for washing while Cole tended the horses. When he came back, she'd already scrubbed the worst of the dirt off and changed into a clean dress. One of only 3 she owned. "I'll make dinner," she said. You should rest. I can handle—" "Cole," she cut him off. "Partners, remember? I cook, you clean. Or we both cook and both clean. But stop trying to do everything yourself." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. We'll cook together." They did. Cole showed her how to make pan bread over the stove, how to season the salt pork so it didn't taste like chewing leather. Clara added what she knew about timing and proportion. Together, they produced a meal that was almost good. "Where did you learn to cook?" Clara asked, sitting across from him at the table. "Trail drives. You learn quick, or you starve." He took a bite of bread, nodded approval. "Where did you learn?" "My mother. She died when I was 15, so I took over the household." Clara hadn't thought about those days in years. "My father wasn't good at caring for himself. Neither was Tommy, so I learned. And then became a teacher. Only job available for a woman with some education and no husband." She smiled without humor. "The school board made it very clear I was there on sufferance. One whiff of impropriety and I'd be out." Impropriety meaning what? Talking to a man? Having opinions? Both. Either. The rules were never exactly clear, which was the point. Keep women scared, keep them obedient. Clara met his eyes. "I spent 3 years walking on eggshells, making myself smaller and quieter so I wouldn't give them an excuse to fire me. And you know what? I hated every minute of it." "But you're good at it. Teaching, I mean. How would you know?" "Because you explained roof repairs to me today using teaching language. Breaking it down into steps, checking understanding, encouraging progress." He shrugged. "That's not something people can fake." Clara blinked. She hadn't even realized she'd been doing that. "I suppose, but being good at something and enjoying it aren't the same thing." "No," Cole agreed. "They're not." They finished eating in silence. Clara washed dishes while Cole banked the fire for the night. The routine was already becoming familiar, comfortable even. "Clara," Cole said as she was heading to her bedroom, "thank you for today. For not complaining, not demanding to go back, just working. I appreciate it." "We're partners," Clara said simply. "This is my home too now. Of course I'm going to work for it." She closed the door to her bedroom, turned the lock more from habit than fear, and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. Sleep dragged her under immediately. The days blurred together. They finished the roof, moved on to the barn, then to fencing, then to a dozen other projects the ranch desperately needed. Clara learned to swing a hammer without hitting her thumb, to measure lumber, to judge when a structure was sound. Her hands developed calluses. Her arms got stronger. Her back stopped aching quite so much. She also learned about Cole. Not from direct questions, he was too private for that, but from observation. The way he checked the horizon constantly, like expecting trouble. The way he never sat with his back to a door. The scars she glimpsed when he rolled up his sleeves to work, knife wounds, bullet wounds, the marks of a violent life. But she also saw the way he was careful with the horses, gentle and patient. The way he fixed things instead of replacing them, making do with what they had. The way he kept his word about everything, no matter how small. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Clara woke to the sound of hammering. She pulled on her dress and went outside to find Cole building something behind the house. "What's that?" she asked. "Bathing room." He didn't look up from his work. "Figure we both deserve better than sponge baths in our bedrooms. There's a natural hot spring about 50 yards that way. I'm building an enclosure and diverting some of the water. Won't be fancy, but it'll be private and warm." Clara stared. A bath. A real bath. Not a cold basin of water in a rag. She'd almost forgotten what that felt like. "That's..." She couldn't find words. "Thank you. Thank me when it's finished. Right now it's just lumber and optimism." But he smiled slightly. "Should be done in a couple of days if the weather holds." It took 3 days, but Cole finished it. A small structure built over the hot spring, with a door that latched and bench seating carved into the rock. The water ran clear and hot, steam rising into the cool October air. "Ladies first," Cole said. "I'll give you an hour, then it's my turn." Clara didn't waste time. She stripped off her work-stained clothes, sank into the water, and nearly wept from the sheer relief of it. Heat seeped into her aching muscles, washing away 2 weeks of grime and exhaustion. She stayed until the water started to cool, then forced herself out. Dressed in clean clothes, she emerged to find Cole sitting on the porch, cleaning his rifle. "It's all yours," she said. He nodded, stood, paused. "You look different." "Different how? Happier?" He said it like he was just noticing. Or maybe just less miserable, hard to tell. Clara realized he was right. She was happier, or at least less trapped, which amounted to the same thing. "I think I'm just adjusting to all of this." "Yeah?" Cole looked genuinely curious. "So you don't regret it? Marrying a stranger and moving to the middle of nowhere? Ask me again in 6 months." But Clara smiled. "For now, no, I don't regret it." Something passed over Cole's face. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. "Good. That's good." He headed for the bathing room. Clara watched him go, then returned to the house, to the kitchen where she was teaching herself to bake bread, to the life that was slowly becoming hers. A month in, they had their first real fight. It started over something stupid. Clara wanted to plant a vegetable garden before the ground froze. Cole said it was too late in the season and they should wait for spring. But it escalated quickly, fueled by a month of unspoken tensions and the stress of constant work. "I know what I'm doing," Clara snapped. "I grew up with a garden. I know the timing. And I'm telling you, it's October in Wyoming. Anything you plant now will be dead before Thanksgiving." Cole's voice stayed level, which somehow made it worse. "We're wasting time and resources." "My resources, too. Or did you forget this is supposed to be a partnership?" "Partnership doesn't mean I shut up when you're about to make a mistake." "No, apparently it means you tell me what to do like I'm a child." They stood in the kitchen, glaring at each other. Clara's heart pounded. She'd never yelled at anyone like this before. It wasn't proper, wasn't ladylike, wasn't any of the things she'd been taught a woman should be. It felt incredible. "I'm not telling you what to do," Cole said through clenched teeth. "I'm giving you information based on experience. What you do with that information is up to you." "Oh, so if I plant the garden and it fails, you get to say I told you so." "No, if you plant the garden and it fails, we'll have wasted seeds and effort we can't afford to waste." He took a breath, visibly forcing calm. "Clara, I'm not trying to control you, but we're living on a budget here. We have to make smart choices." Clara deflated slightly. He was right. She knew he was right. But admitting it felt like giving up ground she couldn't afford to lose. "Fine," she said stiffly. "No garden until spring." "Clara, I said fine." She turned away, blinking back frustrated tears. "I'm going to check on the chickens." They didn't have chickens, but she needed to get out of the house before she said something she'd regret. She stayed outside until dark, sitting by the creek and watching the water flow. Eventually she heard footsteps behind her. "I brought you dinner," Cole said quietly. "Figured you might be hungry." Clara accepted the plate without looking at him. They sat in silence, eating cold beans and bread. I'm sorry, Cole said finally. Not for the advice, but for how I said it. You're right, it came out like an order, not a suggestion. Clara swallowed hard. And I'm sorry for yelling. I've spent my whole life being told what to do, and I thought this would be different. It is different. Here, you get a say. But having a say doesn't mean you're always right, and it doesn't mean I won't disagree with you. He met her eyes. We're going to fight sometimes, Clara. That's what happens when two stubborn people try to share a life. But fighting doesn't mean the partnership's broken. It just means we're both invested enough to care. Clara considered that. So what do we do when we disagree? Talk it through, present our cases. Make a decision together, even if one of us has to compromise. He shrugged. Or flip a coin if we really can't agree, but we don't shut each other out, and we don't let anger fester. Deal? Deal. Clara felt the tension drain out of her shoulders. The garden can wait until spring, and when spring comes, you'll teach me about planting, because I don't actually know much about vegetables. Cole's mouth quirked. Turns out cattle ranching and gardening are different skills. Clara laughed despite herself. Really? I'm shocked. They sat together as the stars came out, the fight already fading into just another part of learning to live together. And Clara realized something important. Fighting with Cole didn't scare her. Because unlike every other man in her life, he didn't use disagreement as an excuse to punish or control her. He just fought fair, then moved on. 6 weeks into their marriage, the first snow came. Clara woke to find the world transformed, white and clean and impossibly quiet. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes fall, and felt something close to contentment. Cole appeared beside her, coffee in hand. Beautiful, isn't it? Yes. Clara accepted the cup he offered. How bad will it get? Bad enough. We'll be snowed in for weeks at a time once winter really hits. Hope you don't mind being stuck with just me for company. Clara glanced at him. Over the past month and a half, Cole Barrett had become familiar in a way she'd never expected. She knew his routines, his habits, the way he thought, knew he was a morning person while she wasn't, that he liked his coffee black, that he sang off-key when he thought she couldn't hear. She knew he was honorable, hardworking, and more patient than any man she'd ever met, that he kept his word, that he treated her like an equal even when it would have been easier not to. Being stuck with him for the winter didn't sound terrible at all. I think I can manage, she said. Cole smiled. Yeah, I think you can too. They stood together, watching the snow fall, and Clara realized that somewhere between signing that contract and this moment, something had shifted. The business arrangement was still there, the year-long timeline, the eventual separation, the practical reality of their situation. But underneath it, something else was growing. Something neither of them had planned for. Something that felt dangerous and necessary and right. Winter settled over the ranch like a fist closing. By December, the snow was knee-deep in places, drifts piling against the barn and house, until Clara had to dig her way out each morning just to reach the animals. The world shrank to what they could see from the windows, white on white on white, broken only by the dark line of the creek and the mountains rising like teeth against the gray sky. Claire had never been so isolated in her life, also had never been so strangely content. She and Cole fell into routines that felt almost domestic. Morning coffee before the sun rose. Chores split evenly. He handled the heavier work. She managed the household and what livestock they'd managed to acquire. Evenings spent by the fire, Clara reading aloud from the books she'd brought while Cole repaired tack or cleaned his guns or just sat and listened. They were careful with each other. Polite. The initial wariness had faded, replaced by something that felt almost like friendship, but they both maintained the boundaries they'd established. Separate bedrooms, separate lives, partners in survival, nothing more. Except Clara was starting to realize that wasn't entirely true anymore. She noticed things. The way Cole's face changed when he smiled, rare but devastating when it happened. The competence in his hands as he worked, efficient and sure. The patience he showed with everything, even when tasks frustrated him. The way he'd started asking her opinion on decisions, really listening to her answers instead of just going through the motions of consultation. And the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle he hadn't expected to find interesting. Clara told herself it didn't matter. In 6 months, they'd go their separate ways. That was the agreement. Getting attached would only make it harder, but her heart wasn't listening to logic anymore. The first krakens or isolated piece came on a gray January morning when Clara heard hoofbeats approaching through the snow. She looked up from kneading bread dough, flour dusting her hands, and felt her stomach drop. Visitors. Out here. In the middle of winter. That couldn't be good. Cole was already at the window, rifle in hand. His whole body had gone tense. That dangerous stillness she'd learned meant he was preparing for trouble. "Stay inside," he said. "Cole, please, Clara, just this once, don't argue." The urgency in his voice made her nod. She watched through the window as Cole stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Two riders approached, men she didn't recognize, dressed in heavy coats with scarves wrapped around their faces against the cold. They stopped at the edge of the porch. The larger one pushed back his scarf, revealing a weathered face and calculating eyes. "Mr. Barrett." His voice carried clearly through the still air. "Name's Jim Cartwright. I work for Mr. Victor Hale. He sent us to deliver a message." Claire's blood went cold. Hale. Even 40 miles and 3 months away, Victor Hale's reach extended into her new life like poison seeping through cracks. "I don't have business with Hale," Cole said, his voice flat. "He thinks you do. See, there's been some confusion about property ownership in this area. Mr. Hale's been reviewing county records, and it seems your grandfather's will might have some irregularities. The will's legal, witnessed and filed properly." Cartwright shrugged. "Maybe. But Mr. Hale's lawyers think otherwise. They're preparing to challenge your claim in court. Could take years to sort out. Expensive, too." He smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "Unless, of course, you're willing to discuss alternative arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" "Mr. Hale's willing to purchase the property. Fair price. Save everyone the trouble of a long legal battle you can't afford to fight." Cole's laugh was harsh. "Fair price from Victor Hale. That's rich. Tell your boss I'm not selling." "He thought you might say that." Cartwright's smile widened. "Which is why he asked me to mention your wife, Mrs. Barrett. Used to be Miss Whitmore from Pine Ridge. Mr. Hale remembers her fondly, says he had an arrangement with her that was rudely interrupted." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Clara saw Cole's grip tighten on the rifle, saw the muscles jump in his jaw. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "You're going to get back on your horses now and ride away. And you're going to tell Hale that if he comes near my wife, if he so much as says her name again, I will kill him. Slowly. That clear enough?" Cartwright's smile never wavered. "Clear as crystal, Mr. Barrett. But you should know, Mr. Hale doesn't make empty threats. He wants this land, and he usually gets what he wants." "Not this time." The two men turned their horses and rode away, disappearing into the white landscape. Cole stood on the porch until they were completely out of sight, then came back inside. His face was stone. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "All of it." Claire's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "He's coming after us." "After the ranch." "Looks like it." "Because of me. Because you stopped him from—" "No." Cole set the rifle down, crossed to where she stood. "Because he's a greedy bastard who sees an opportunity. Your brother's debt gave him leverage over you. Now he thinks he can use that leverage to get this land. It's not about you, Clara. It's about power and money. That's all it's ever about with men like Hale." "But the will, you said it was legal." "It is. But legal doesn't always matter when the other side has more money and better lawyers." Cole's expression was grim. "Hale can tie this up in court for years. Bleed me dry with legal fees until I have to sell just to survive. And even if I win eventually, the ranch will be worthless by then." Clara felt sick. She'd brought this on him. Her problems, her past, her brother's gambling debt. It had all followed her here like a curse. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Cole. If I'd known—" "You'd what? Married Hale instead? Gone along quietly so he could destroy you instead of just threatening us?" Cole shook his head. "This isn't your fault. Hale's the one making threats, and we're going to stop him." "How?" "I don't know yet." He pulled out a chair, sat heavily. "But we'll figure something out. We always do." Clara wanted to believe him, but Victor Hale had resources they couldn't match, connections they didn't have. What could two people alone on a ranch in the middle of nowhere do against a man like that? The answer came 3 days later in the form of another visitor. This time it was Tommy. Clara saw him riding up through the snow and felt nothing. No anger, no relief, just a vast emptiness where her brother used to live in her heart. Cole appeared beside her at the window. "That's him?" "Yes." "You want me to send him away?" Part of Clara did, but part of her needed to know why he'd come. What could possibly have brought Tommy Whitmore out into winter weather to the ranch he'd essentially sold her to escape? "Let him in," she said quietly, "but stay with me." Cole nodded. Tommy looked terrible when he stumbled through the door. Thinner than Clara remembered, his face gaunt and marked with fresh bruises. His coat was too thin for the weather, his boots worn through. He looked like a man who'd hit bottom and kept digging. "Clara?" His voice cracked. "Thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure I should have." Clara stayed behind the table, putting solid wood between them. "What do you want, Tommy?" "To warn you." Tommy's eyes darted to Cole, then back to Clara. "Hale's planning something bad. I heard him talking to his men." "We know," Cole said. "He already sent Cartwright out here with threats." "It's worse than threats." Tommy collapsed into a chair without being invited, put his head in his hands. "He's going to challenge the will, yeah. But he's also planning to claim that the marriage isn't legal. That you and Mr. Barrett committed fraud to claim the inheritance." Clara's stomach dropped. "That's insane. We have witnesses. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony." "Morrison's father is dying. Once he's gone, Morrison will rule however Hale tells him to. And Hale's going to argue that the marriage was a business arrangement, not a real union. That makes it fraudulent under the terms of the will." "How would he prove that?" Cole's voice was sharp. Tommy wouldn't meet his eyes. "Because I told him about the contract, the terms, the whole arrangement. He got me drunk and I just kept talking. I'm sorry, Clara, I'm so sorry, but he knew exactly what to ask and I couldn't." "Get out." Clara's voice came out flat, emotionless. "Clara, please, get out of my house, now." "I came to warn you. I'm trying to help." "You sold me once already, Tommy. Now you've done it again." Clara felt cold all the way through. "The only reason you're here is because whatever Hale promised you didn't work out. You're not trying to help. You're trying to ease your conscience." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Clara's voice rose. "You want to talk about fair? You gambled away our parents' house, sold me to Hale like cattle. And now you've given him ammunition to destroy the one good thing I've managed to build. Don't you dare talk to me about fair." Tommy stood swaying slightly. "I know I've made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Cole stepped forward, and there was something in his posture that made Tommy back up instinctively. "You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Selfish, cowardly choices. And your sister paid for every single one of them." "I'm trying to make it right. By telling us what we already suspected? That's not making it right. That's covering your own ass." Cole's voice stayed level, but barely. "You want to actually help? Go back to Pine Ridge and stay away from Hale. Stop drinking. Stop gambling. Stop destroying everything you touch. But don't come here pretending to be the hero when you're the reason we're in this mess." Tommy looked at Clara, pleading. She looked back and felt nothing but tired disgust. "Goodbye, Tommy." He left. Clara watched him ride away into the snow and wondered if she'd ever see him again. Wondered if she even cared. "You all right?" Cole asked quietly. "No, but I will be." Clara turned to face him. "He's right, though, about the marriage. If Hale can prove it's just a business arrangement, he can invalidate the inheritance claim. Only if he can get witnesses to testify to that effect. And the only people who know the terms are you, me, and the lawyer who drew up the contract. And Tommy, apparently. Tommy's not a reliable witness. Any lawyer worth their salt will tear him apart on the stand." Cole sat down at the table thinking. "But it's still a problem. Hale's going to push this as hard as he can, try to find any crack in our story." Clara sat across from him. "So what do? We make sure there are no cracks." Cole met her eyes. "The will required marriage. We're married. Legal ceremony, proper witnesses, filed with the county. Everything else is just noise unless Hale can prove fraud. But if someone examines our living situation, separate bedrooms, separate finances, lots of married couples live that way. It's not proof of anything." Clara chewed her lip, thinking. He'll argue it's a contract marriage, that we never intended it to be real. Then we make it real. The words hung in the air between them. "Cole, not like that." He held up a hand quickly. I mean, we make it look real. In public, around witnesses. We go into Pine Ridge together, attend social functions as husband and wife. Let people see us as a couple. Build a narrative that contradicts Hale's story. It made sense. Awful, uncomfortable sense. Clara had spent months carefully maintaining the boundaries of their arrangement. Now Cole was suggesting they blur those lines deliberately. That could work, she said slowly. But Hale knows us both. He'll be looking for any sign we're faking. Then we'll have to be convincing. Cole's jaw set. I know it's asking a lot. This wasn't part of the original agreement, but if we want to keep this ranch, keep our arrangement intact, we don't have a choice, Clara finished. I know. They looked at each other across the table. Partners. That's what they'd been for 3 months now. But partners who maintained careful distance, who never touched except by accident, who lived parallel lives under the same roof. Now they'd have to pretend to be something more. Or maybe, Clara thought with a flutter of panic, they wouldn't have to pretend at all. When do we start? She asked. There's a cattle auction in Pine Ridge next week. Ranchers from all over the territory will be there. Perfect opportunity to be seen together. Cole studied her face. You don't have to do this, Clara. We could fight Hale in court instead and lose everything in legal fees like you said. Clara straightened her spine. No, we do this your way. We play the parts Hale doesn't expect, and we beat him at his own game. Cole's expression shifted into something that might have been admiration. You're tougher than you look. I've had to be. Clara stood. I should check on dinner, and we should probably discuss what being a convincing couple actually looks like. That conversation happened after dinner, both of them awkward as teenagers at a dance. So, Cole started, then stopped. Tried again. In public, married couples usually, they stand close, touch casually, that sort of thing. Right, of course. Clara's face felt hot. I can do that. And we'd need a consistent story about how we met, why we married quickly, what our plans are. They spent the evening constructing their fictional romance. How Cole had been passing through Pine Ridge and seen Clara teaching school. How he'd been immediately taken with her intelligence and grace. How he'd courted her properly for weeks before proposing. How she'd said yes because she saw in him a chance for real partnership, real respect. The lies came easily because they were threaded with truth. Clara had been trapped before Cole offered escape. He had offered her respect and partnership. They did work well together. They just left out the parts about contracts and desperation and $23,000. We should practice, Cole said finally. The touching, I mean, so it doesn't look awkward when we're actually in town. Clara nodded, her mouth dry. That makes sense. Cole stood, held out his hand. Clara took it. His palm was calloused, warm, solid. He drew her closer, his other hand settling light on her waist. Like this, he said quietly. Married people stand like this sometimes. Close, but not... It's not inappropriate. Clara could barely breathe. They'd been living in the same house for 3 months, and this was the closest they'd been since the wedding. She could feel the heat of him through her dress, smell the soap he used and the wood smoke that clung to his clothes. This is fine, she managed. Very convincing. Cole's mouth quirked slightly. You're stiff as a board. I'm nervous. Don't be. It's just me. His hand on her waist shifted slightly, more secure. Relax. We're supposed to be comfortable with each other. Clara forced herself to breathe, to let some of the tension drain from her shoulders. Cole was right. They were comfortable with each other. They'd worked together, argued together, built a life together. This was just another kind of partnership. Except it didn't feel like partnership when his thumb brushed absently against her waist. When she could see the gray flecks in his eyes this close. When her heart was doing complicated things in her chest that had nothing to do with pretending. Better, Cole said, and his voice was rougher than usual. That's better. They stood like that for a long moment. Then Clara stepped back, breaking the contact. I think we'll manage, she said, trying for casual and landing somewhere near breathless. At the auction, we'll be fine. Yeah. Cole cleared his throat. We'll be fine. Neither of them slept well that night. The cattle auction was held in Pine Ridge's largest barn, packed with ranchers and buyers, and the smell of livestock and tobacco smoke. Clara walked in on Cole's arm, wearing her best dress and trying not to show how nervous she was. People stared. Of course they stared. The schoolteacher who disappeared 3 months ago now returned as Mrs. Cole Barrett, married to a stranger. The gossip was probably already spreading like wildfire. "Ignore them," Cole murmured, his hand warm and steady on her back. Eyes forward. They made their way through the crowd. Cole stopped to talk with other ranchers, introducing Clara each time. She played her part, smiling, gracious, the perfect rancher's wife. And she watched people's reactions, saw the curiosity, the surprise, the speculation. Then she saw Victor Hale. He stood across the barn, impeccably dressed as always, watching them with those cold, calculating eyes. When he saw Clara looking, he smiled and raised his glass in a mocking toast. Clara's stomach turned, but she forced herself to smile back, to lean slightly into Cole's side like a woman with nothing to fear. "He's here," she murmured. "I know." Cole's arm slipped around her waist, casual and possessive. "Let him watch. Let him see we're not afraid of him." Hale approached eventually. Of course he did. "Mr. Barrett, Mrs. Barrett." His voice dripped false courtesy. "How lovely to see you both in town. I trust married life agrees with you?" "Very much," Clara said before Cole could respond. "My husband and I are extremely happy." "How wonderful. And so sudden, wasn't it? Your marriage. Barely knew each other, and yet here you are." Hale's smile was sharp. "Some might call that impulsive. Some might call it love," Cole countered smoothly. "When you meet the right person, you know, no point waiting." "How romantic." Hale's eyes narrowed. "Although I heard, forgive me if I'm wrong, that there were certain contractual elements to your union? Something about inheritance requirements?" "My grandfather's will required marriage to claim the property," Cole said easily. "But that was just convenient timing. I'd already decided to marry Clara before I even knew about the land." The lie came out smooth as silk. Clara tried to look appropriately adoring. "Is that so?" Hale studied them both. "Fascinating. Because my sources suggest something quite different. They suggest this is merely a business arrangement, a fraud, in fact." "Your sources are wrong." Clara's voice stayed steady despite her racing heart. "Cole and I married because we love each other. The inheritance is secondary." "Then you won't mind proving it." Hale leaned in slightly. "In court, if necessary. I'm sure a judge would be very interested in examining the nature of your relationship. Separate bedrooms, separate finances, an expiration date on your marriage contract." Clara felt Cole tense beside her. They were walking a knife edge here. One wrong word and Hale would know he'd hit a nerve. "We don't have to prove anything to you," Cole said quietly. "Our marriage is legal and recognized by the territory. If you want to waste your money challenging it in court, that's your business, but you'll lose." "Will I?" Hale's smile widened. "We'll see, Mr. Barrett, we'll see." He walked away. Clara forced herself to keep breathing normally, to not show the panic clawing at her throat. "Did we convince him?" she whispered. "No." Cole's jaw was tight. "But we didn't have to. We just had to plant doubt, make him work harder to prove his case." They stayed at the auction another hour, playing their parts, letting people see them as a united front. By the time they left, Clara's face hurt from smiling. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Clara stared at the darkening sky, trying to process everything that had happened. "He knows," she said finally. "About the contract, about everything." "Probably, but knowing and proving are different things." Cole kept his eyes on the road. "We just need to make sure his version of events is less believable than ours." "How?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, "We make the marriage real. Not just in public, but legally. We file joint finances, combine our assets, eliminate anything that suggests this is temporary. Make it impossible for Hale to argue fraud." Clara's heart stuttered. That changes everything, the whole arrangement." "I know." Cole finally looked at her. "But it's the only way to protect what we've built. And at the end of the year, we can still dissolve it, file for divorce, split the assets fairly. But while we're fighting Hale, we need to be legally and financially one unit." It made sense. Terrible, frightening sense. "And if one of us wants out before the year is up," Clara asked quietly, "if this becomes too much, then we figure it out, together." Cole's expression was serious. "I won't trap you, Clara. That was never the point. But I won't let Hale win either." Clara thought about the ranch, about the life they'd built together, the routines and arguments and small moments of unexpected joy, about going back to Pine Ridge, to a world where women like her had no choices, and men like Hale always won. "All right," she said, "we do it your way. We make this real." Cole nodded slowly. "Then starting tomorrow, we plan our defense, and we show Victor Hale exactly what he's up against." Clara looked out at the snow-covered landscape, at the ranch waiting in the distance, at the future she'd never planned for but was starting to want with an intensity that scared her. Somewhere behind them, Tommy was probably drinking away his guilt in some Pine Ridge saloon. Hale was probably already plotting his next move, and Clara and Cole were about to blur every line they'd carefully drawn between them. But for the first time since signing that contract, Clara felt something stronger than fear or resignation. She felt ready to fight. The plan came together over the next 3 days like pieces of a puzzle Clara hadn't known she was assembling. Cole spread maps across the kitchen table, marked property lines, wrote down names and dates until the papers covered every available surface. "Hale's been buying up land around Pine Ridge for 5 years, Cole said, tapping a circled area on the map. "Small parcels, mostly from people who couldn't pay their debts. He's been building a monopoly on water rights in this valley." Clara leaned over his shoulder, studying the pattern. "And your grandfather's land?" "Sits right in the middle of his planned expansion. There's a creek that runs through here," Cole traced a blue line with his finger, "that feeds into the main river. Control this property, you control water access for half the territory." "So this was never about me, or even about you." Clara felt cold. "It's about water. Everything out here is about water eventually." Cole sat back, rubbed his eyes. He'd been up since before dawn, riding out to talk to neighboring ranchers, gathering information. "Hale's been patient, waiting for my claim to fail on its own. But now that we're married and the inheritance is secure, he has to act. By challenging the marriage in court, right. If he can prove fraud, the inheritance reverts to the territory. Then he buys it at auction for pennies on the dollar." Cole's expression was grim. He's probably already bribed someone in the land office to make sure he's the only bidder. Clara paced the kitchen, thinking. "So we need to prove the marriage is legitimate, but we also need to prove Hale's been manipulating the system, otherwise he just tries again." "Exactly." Cole watched her pace, something almost like admiration in his eyes. "You're thinking like a strategist." "I'm thinking like someone who's tired of being pushed around." Clara stopped, faced him. "What if we don't just defend ourselves? What if we go on the offense?" "How?" Clara pulled out a chair, sat down across from him. "Tommy said Hale got him drunk, and he talked. What if we do the same thing? Get one of Hale's men to talk, gather evidence of his land schemes, his bribes, everything. Then we don't just prove our marriage is real, we prove Hale's the real fraud." Cole stared at her. "That's dangerous. If Hale finds out we're investigating him, what's he going to do? He's already threatening us, already planning to destroy our claim in court." Clara leaned forward. "We can sit here waiting for him to attack, or we can attack first. Which would you rather do?" A slow smile spread across Cole's face. "You're scary when you're angry, you know that?" "Good. I've spent 22 years being scared. It's someone else's turn." They spent the rest of the day planning. Cole knew which of Hale's men were weak links, the ones who drank too much, talked too freely, might be convinced to turn on their employer for the right price. Clara contributed what she knew about Pine Ridge social dynamics, who was loyal to whom, which families were suffering under Hale's business practices. "Jim Cartwright," Cole said finally. "The man who delivered Hale's first threat. He's been with Hale for years, knows everything, but he's also got a gambling problem worse than your brother's. And word is Hale's been shorting his pay. How do we get him to talk? We don't. We get him to think he can make money by talking to someone else." Cole pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, started writing. "There's a claims lawyer in Cheyenne, Nathaniel Price. He's known for taking on cases against powerful men. If Cartwright thinks Price will pay for information about Hale's land schemes, he might betray Hale to cover his gambling debts." Clara finished the thought. "But how do we convince him Price is interested?" Cole's smile turned sharp. "We don't have to convince him. We just have to make sure he overhears the right conversation in the right place." The trap took a week to set. Cole made 2 trips to Pine Ridge, always in public, always where Hale's men could see him. The first time he met with a local businessman at the saloon, talking just loud enough about legal troubles and lawyers in Cheyenne. The second time, he accidentally left a letter on the bar, a forged correspondence from Nathaniel Price, expressing interest in investigating land fraud in the territory. Clara played her part too. She visited the general store, the dressmaker, anywhere she might encounter the town's gossips. She mentioned casually that her husband was concerned about irregularities in local land transactions, that he'd heard lawyers were willing to pay good money for evidence of fraud. Within 3 days, half of Pine Ridge knew the Barretts were investigating something. Within 5 days, Jim Cartwright was drinking heavily at the Broken Spur and asking pointed questions about lawyers who paid informants. By day 7, Cartwright took the bait. Cole came back from town just after dark, his expression tight with suppressed excitement. Clara met him at the door. Did it work? Better than I hoped. Cole hung his coat, moved to the fire to warm his hands. Cartwright approached me directly, said he had information about Hale's business practices that might be valuable to the right people. What did you tell him? That I'd pass the message to my contacts in Cheyenne, that if his information was solid, he could expect to be compensated. Cole's eyes glinted. He's desperate, Clara. Owes money all over town. He'll sell out Hale for enough cash to clear his debts. How much? $500. Clara winced. That was a significant chunk of their savings. Can we afford it? Can we afford not to? Cole countered. If Cartwright gives us what I think he will, we'll have enough to bury Hale legally. No more threats. No more court battles. We win. Clara nodded slowly. When do we meet him? Tomorrow night, abandoned line shack about 5 miles west of Pine Ridge, neutral ground. Cole hesitated. I don't want you there, Clara. If something goes wrong, I'm coming. Her voice left no room for argument. We're partners, remember? I don't sit home waiting while you take all the risks. Cole studied her face, then sighed. You're not going to let this go, are you? Not a chance. Fine. But you stay behind me, and if I say run, you run. Agreed? Agreed. They left the ranch at dusk the next evening, riding through snow that had turned to slush under a brief warming trend. The line shack sat at the edge of Hale's territory, a decrepit structure that had seen better days decades ago. A single horse was tied outside, Cartwright's. Cole dismounted first, helped Clara down. His hand lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary. Ready? As I'll ever be. They pushed open the door. Inside, Jim Cartwright sat on a broken chair, a bottle of whiskey on the floor beside him. He looked worse than Clara remembered, unshaven, shaking slightly, eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Mr. Barrett, Cartwright stood unsteadily. Mrs. Barrett didn't expect the lady. My wife has an interest in seeing this resolved, Cole said smoothly. You said you had information about Victor Hale's business practices. That's right. Cartwright licked his lips. But first, the money. You bring it? Cole pulled out a leather pouch, held it up, but didn't hand it over. Half now, half when we verify your information is accurate. That was the deal. Cartwright's hands twitched toward the pouch, but he nodded. Fair enough. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with the land acquisitions. What came out over the next hour was damning. Cartwright talked about forged documents, intimidation tactics, bribes paid to county officials to overlook irregularities in property transfers. He named names, gave dates, described specific instances where Hale had forced families off their land through manufactured debts and legal manipulation. Clara listened with growing horror. She'd known Hale was ruthless, but the scope of his corruption was staggering. Dozens of families displaced, lives ruined. Also, one man could control water rights and expand his empire. And the Barrett's land? Cole asked quietly. What were his plans there? He's been waiting for you to fail the inheritance requirements for 3 years, Cartwright said. Had lawyers ready to challenge it on every possible ground. When you showed up married, it threw him. But then your brother-in-law started talking, and Hale saw an opportunity. Tommy told him about the contract, Clara said flatly. In detail. The 1-year term, the separate finances, everything. Cartwright took a swig from his bottle. Hale's been building a case for fraud ever since. Got depositions from people who saw you two in town, acting businesslike. Got your brother ready to testify that the whole thing was arranged to cheat the inheritance requirements. Cole's jaw tightened. Tommy agreed to testify against us? For enough money, your brother would testify against his own mother. Cartwright's laugh was bitter. He's got debts again. Hale's been feeding them, keeping him desperate. When this goes to court, Tommy Whitmore will say whatever Hale tells him to say. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd known Tommy was weak, but this, actively testifying against her to line Hale's pockets, was a betrayal beyond anything she'd imagined. Is that everything? Cole asked. Not quite. Cartwright leaned forward. Hale's planning something bigger. In 2 weeks, there's a territorial meeting about water rights allocation. He's got the votes bought and paid for to change the regulations, make it so anyone without legal title to their land by a certain date loses their water access entirely. That would destroy half the small ranchers in the territory. That's the point. They can't survive without water. They sell to Hale at whatever price he offers, or they lose everything. Cartwright's expression was almost apologetic. He's been planning this for years. Your marriage just became one more obstacle to clear. Cole pulled out the money pouch, counted out half the bills, and handed them over. You'll testify to all of this? In court, under oath. Cartwright's hands shook as he took the money. I'll testify, but Hale will kill me if he finds out. Then make sure he doesn't find out until it's too late. Cole's voice went hard. Take that money, pay your debts, and get out of Pine Ridge. Go somewhere Hale can't reach you. When we need you for trial, we'll send word. And the rest of my payment? When you show up in court and tell the truth. Cole stood. Disappear, Cartwright. Tonight. Don't go home. Don't say goodbye. Just ride out and don't look back. Cartwright nodded, clutching the money like a lifeline. He stumbled out of the line shack without another word. Clara and Cole waited until they heard hoofbeats fading into the distance, then looked at each other. We have him, Clara breathed. We actually have him. We have evidence, Cole corrected. But we need more than Cartwright's testimony. We need documentation, proof that even Hale's lawyers can't argue away. The land office records. If what Cartwright said is true, there will be irregularities in the documents. Forgeries, altered dates. Getting access to those records won't be easy. Hale's people control the land office. Clara smiled slowly. But they don't control the territorial archives in Cheyenne. Every land transaction gets filed there too, and unlike Pine Ridge, Cheyenne has officials who aren't on Hale's payroll. Cole stared at her. You're suggesting we go to Cheyenne. Request copies of every land transfer Hale's made in the past 5 years. Compare them to the local records and find the discrepancies. Exactly. That's brilliant. Cole's expression shifted into something warm and admiring. How did you think of that? I was a school teacher. We had to request educational records from the territorial office all the time. The archives are public record. Anyone can access them for a small fee. Clara felt a surge of satisfaction. Hale's been so focused on controlling Pine Ridge, he probably never considered someone would go over his head. We leave for Cheyenne tomorrow. The trip took 3 days through rapidly melting snow. They pushed hard, staying at way stations and cheap hotels, always moving. Clara had never been to Cheyenne before. The territorial capital sprawled larger than any town she'd seen, with actual paved streets and buildings 3 stories tall. The archives were housed in a granite building near the Capitol. A board clerk took their request and disappeared into the stacks, returning an hour later with boxes of land transfer documents. Clara and Cole spent 2 days cross-referencing records. It was tedious, exhausting work, comparing dates, signatures, legal descriptions. But slowly, the pattern emerged. Dozens of transfers with altered dates, forged signatures, property descriptions that didn't match the original surveys. This is enough, Cole said on the 3rd day, staring at the pile of discrepancies they'd documented. This is more than enough to prove fraud. It proves Hale's been manipulating land records, Clara agreed. But does it prove the marriage challenge's retaliation? Cole pulled out Cartwright's testimony notes. Combined with this? Yes. We show a pattern of Hale using the legal system to steal land. Then we show he's doing the same thing to us because we won't sell. Any reasonable judge will see through it. Judge Morrison isn't reasonable. He's Hale's brother-in-law. Then we request a change of venue. Take this to a territorial judge in Cheyenne. Cole started organizing the documents. Hale's power doesn't extend this far. Out here, we're on equal footing. They filed the motion that afternoon. A territorial clerk stamped their petition, assigned a case number, and told them a hearing would be scheduled within 2 weeks. Now what? Clara asked as they left the courthouse. Now we go home and wait. Cole took her arm, guiding her through the crowded street. And we prepare for Hale's response, because he's not going to take this lying down. They were right to worry. 2 days after they returned to the ranch, Sheriff Morrison showed up with an arrest warrant. "Cole Barrett," Morrison said from horseback, flanked by 2 deputies. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to defraud inheritance law, and falsifying marriage documents." Clara's blood went cold. "That's insane. We filed a petition in Cheyenne, and Mr. Hale filed criminal charges here in Pine Ridge." Morrison's expression was apologetic, but firm. "I have to take him in, Mrs. Barrett. It's the law." "The law bought and paid for by Hale," Cole said quietly. He met Clara's eyes. "It's all right. This is just intimidation. They can't hold me long without evidence. They can hold you long enough for Hale to do whatever he's planning." Clara's mind raced. "I'm coming with you." "No. I'm your wife. I have a right to be there." She turned to Morrison. "Unless you're arresting me too?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "No, ma'am. Just your husband." "Then I'm coming to Pine Ridge. You can't stop me." The Pine Ridge jail was a small building behind the courthouse, with 2 cells and a single guard. They locked Cole in the larger cell, and Clara demanded a chair so she could sit outside the bars. Morrison granted it, probably because refusing would make him look even more like Hale's puppet. "You should go back to the ranch," Cole said once Morrison left. "It's not safe for you here." "It's not safe for you either." Clara pulled the chair close to the bars. "What's Hale's play? He knows we filed in Cheyenne. He knows we have evidence. Why arrest you now?" "To separate us. Make you vulnerable." Cole's hands gripped the bars. "He's going to come for you, Clara. Try to intimidate you into dropping the petition. Or worse." "Let him try." Clara's voice was steel. "I'm not the scared schoolteacher anymore, and I'm not leaving you here alone." They sat in silence for a while. Then Clara heard footsteps. She turned to find Victor Hale standing in the hallway, immaculate as always, smiling like he'd already won. "Mrs. Barrett, how devoted you are to your husband." Hale's tone was mocking. "Although I wonder, is it devotion or just good acting? It's so hard to tell with you two." "What do you want, Hale?" Clara didn't bother being polite. "To offer you a way out." Hale pulled up another chair, sat down like they were having tea. "Your husband is facing serious criminal charges. Fraud, conspiracy. He could spend years in prison. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to drop all charges if you simply admit the truth, that your marriage was a business arrangement designed to cheat inheritance law." "Go to hell," Clara said pleasantly. Hale's smile tightened. "I'd think carefully before refusing, my dear. You're all alone out here. No family, no friends, no protection. Accidents happen on isolated ranches. Fires, for instance. Terrible things. Fires." Cole surged against the bars. "You threaten her again, and I'll—" "You'll what?" "You're in a cell, Mr. Barrett. You're in no position to make threats." Hale turned back to Clara. "I'm offering you one chance to walk away from this. Admit the marriage is fake, sign the ranch over to me, and I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else. Refuse, and I'll destroy you both." Clara met his eyes and saw exactly what he was. A man so used to winning that he couldn't conceive of losing. A man who saw people as obstacles to clear, not human beings with their own agency. And in that moment, she understood something important. Hale's whole strategy relied on fear, on people being too scared to fight back. But Clara had been scared before, had lived under fear's weight for years. She knew its shape, its limits, and she was done letting it control her. "No," she said clearly. "We're not dropping the petition. We're not admitting anything, and we're going to expose every corrupt thing you've done for the past 5 years. You can threaten us, arrest us, try to destroy us, but you're going to lose, Hale, because we have something you don't." "And what's that?" "The truth." Clara stood, faced him directly. "We have documented evidence of your land fraud. We have a witness ready to testify. And we have a territorial judge who doesn't take bribes. So unless you plan to kill us both, which I notice you keep threatening but haven't actually done, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet." Hale's face darkened. He stood slowly, and for a moment Clara thought he might actually strike her, but he just smiled, cold and cruel. "You're tougher than I gave you credit for, Miss Whitmore. I mean, Mrs. Barrett. Or is it still Miss Whitmore in private?" He headed for the door, then paused. "Your brother sends his regards, by the way. He's very eager to testify about your fake marriage. Family loyalty is such a rare thing these days." He left. Clara stayed standing until she heard the outer door close, then collapsed back into the chair, shaking. "Clara." Cole's voice was rough. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. Her heart was hammering, her hands trembling, but she'd faced down Victor Hale and hadn't broken. That had to count for something. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Cole said quietly. "Or the stupidest. Sometimes they're the same thing." He reached through the bars and Clara took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. "We're going to beat him, Pete." "I know." And strangely, she did know. They had the evidence, the witness, the venue. All they had to do was survive long enough to use it. Sheriff Morrison released Cole the next morning without explanation. No charges filed, no arraignment scheduled. Just a curt, "You're free to go," and a warning to stay out of trouble. Hale's lawyer probably told him the arrest wouldn't stick, Cole said as they rode back to the ranch. Or the territorial court got wind of it and made noise. Either way, he backed down. "He's scared," Clara realized. "We actually scared him." "Good. Scared men make mistakes." The territorial hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. They spent the time preparing their case, organizing documents, rehearsing testimony. A letter arrived from Cheyenne confirming that Jim Cartwright had been located and subpoenaed to testify. Everything was falling into place. Then, 5 days before the hearing, Tommy showed up at the ranch again. Clara saw him riding up and felt nothing but tired resignation. What now? But when Tommy dismounted, she saw something different in his face. Not the desperate guilt or selfish pleading from before. He looked sober, determined, almost like the brother she remembered from childhood. "I'm not here to make excuses," Tommy said before either of them could speak. "I'm here to tell you what I'm going to do." "And what's that?" Cole's hand rested on his rifle, not quite threatening, but ready. "I'm going to testify at your hearing." Tommy met Clara's eyes. "I'm going to tell them Hale got me drunk and manipulated me into talking about your contract, that he's been using me to build his fraud case, and I'm going to admit I was supposed to lie on the stand for money." Clara stared. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of being the villain in your story." Tommy's voice cracked. "I've made nothing but bad choices my whole life, Clara. Hurt everyone who tried to help me. But this, testifying for Hale, destroying the one good thing you've managed to build, that would have been unforgivable, even for me." "He'll destroy you," Clara said quietly. "Hale doesn't forgive betrayal." "I know. But maybe that's what I need." Tommy smiled weakly. "A chance to do one right thing before I completely ruin myself." "Let me have that, Clara. Let me be your brother again, just this once." Clara looked at Cole. He shrugged slightly. "Your choice." She turned back to Tommy. "All right, you testify. You tell the truth. And after this is over, you get help, real help. Not just promises, actual action. You quit drinking, quit gambling, and you build a life that doesn't destroy everyone around you." Tommy nodded. "I will. I swear I will." "Don't swear, just do it." They let Tommy stay in the barn that night. In the morning, he rode with them to Cheyenne. The hearing took place in a wood-paneled courtroom that smelled of old paper and furniture polish. Judge Catherine Warren presided, a stern woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. Hale's lawyers presented first, arguing that the Barrett marriage was fraudulent based on its contractual nature and separate living arrangements. They called witnesses who'd seen Cole and Clara acting businesslike in public. They presented Tommy's initial deposition describing the one-year arrangement. Then it was their turn. Cole took the stand first, calm and factual. Yes, the marriage had originated as a contract. Yes, there were initially separate bedrooms and finances. But over the course of their time together, the relationship had evolved into a genuine partnership. They'd combined their assets, built a life together, developed real affection and respect. Was it a traditional romance? No, but it was a real marriage by any legal definition. Clara testified next, describing how the contract had offered her escape from Hale's coercion, how Cole had treated her as an equal from the beginning, how they'd worked together to build the ranch, make decisions jointly, become true partners. "And do you love your husband, Mrs. Barrett?" Hale's lawyer asked snidely. Clara looked at Cole across the courtroom, at his scarred hands and serious eyes and the way he'd never once lied to her or tried to control her or made her feel like anything less than his equal. "Yes," she said, and realized as she said it that it was true. I do. Then Jim Cartwright took the stand. He described Hale's land fraud in detail. The forgeries, the bribes, the systematic theft disguised as legal transactions. He explained how Hale had targeted the Barrett land specifically because of its water access. "And why are you testifying against your former employer?" the judge asked. "Because I'm tired of being part of his crimes," Cartwright said simply. "And because the Barretts offered me a chance to do the right thing. For once." Finally, Tommy testified. He admitted everything: his gambling debts, his agreement to testify falsely, Hale's manipulation. He described how Hale had gotten him drunk specifically to extract information about the marriage contract. "I was supposed to tell this court that my sister's marriage was a fraud," Tommy said, his voice steady. "Mr. Hale paid me $2,000 to do it. But the truth is, I've watched her these past months. She's happier with Cole Barrett than I've ever seen her. They work together, respect each other, protect each other. That's more real than half the marriages I've seen, contract or no contract." Hale's lawyer tried to discredit him, but the damage was done. The judge took less than an hour to deliberate. "I find the marriage between Cole Barrett and Clara Barrett to be legally valid and entered into in good faith," Judge Warren announced. "Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Victor Hale's land acquisition practices. This court is adjourned." The gavel fell. They'd won. Clara felt Cole's arm around her shoulders, pulling her close, felt Tommy's hand on her back, heard the shocked murmuring from Hale's side of the courtroom. Victor Hale stood frozen, his face purple with rage. Then he turned and walked out without a word. Outside the courthouse, Clara finally let herself breathe. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over," Cole confirmed. "The ranch is ours, legally and completely." Tommy hovered nearby, uncertain. Clara looked at him, really looked. He was still weak, still damaged, but he'd done the right thing when it mattered most. "Thank you," she said quietly. Tommy's eyes filled. "I'm going to get help, like you said. There's a program in Denver for men with drinking problems. I'm going to go there, try to fix what's broken." "Good." Clara hugged him briefly. "Don't make me regret giving you another chance." "I won't, I promise." He stepped back, managed a shaky smile. "Take care of her, Barrett." "Plan to," Cole said. Tommy walked away. Clara watched until he disappeared into the crowd, then turned to Cole. "We did it," she said, still not quite believing it. "You did it," Cole corrected. "You stood up to Hale. Refused to break. Figured out how to fight back. This victory is yours, Clara." "Ours," she insisted. "We're partners, remember?" Cole smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Yeah, we are." They stood on the courthouse steps as the sun set over Cheyenne. Two people who'd started as strangers in a business arrangement and become something neither of them had planned for. Something real. Something worth fighting for. And as Clara looked at her husband, her real husband, not just on paper anymore, she realized the best victory wasn't just beating Hale or saving the ranch. It was finding herself. Finding her strength. Finding a partner who saw her as an equal and never asked her to be anything less. That was worth more than any land or water rights or legal triumph. That was worth everything. The ride back to the ranch took 2 days, and neither of them spoke much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much, too many emotions still raw, too many realizations settling into place like bones knitting back together after a break. Clara watched the landscape change from the crowded streets of Cheyenne back to open prairie, then to the familiar hills surrounding their valley. Their valley. Their ranch. Legally theirs now. No question. No threat hanging over it. She should have felt relieved, triumphant even. Instead, she felt terrified, because the danger was gone, which meant the reason for their careful boundaries was gone too. They'd combined their finances for the court case. They'd testified under oath about their real partnership, their real affection. Clara had said she loved him in front of a judge and a courtroom full of witnesses. And she'd meant it. The question was, what happened now? They reached the ranch just before sunset on the second day. Cole helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. Or maybe she was imagining it. Maybe she was seeing things that weren't there because she wanted them to be. "I'll tend the horses," Cole said, already moving away. You should go inside, warm up. It's been a long ride. Clara nodded, watched him lead the horses to the barn. The distance between them felt like a chasm she didn't know how to cross. Inside, the house felt different, or maybe she felt different. She moved through the kitchen, lighting lamps, stoking the fire, going through familiar motions while her mind raced with unfamiliar questions. The original contract had been for 1 year. They were 4 months in. That left 8 months before they were supposed to dissolve the marriage, split the assets, go their separate ways. Except Clara didn't want to go anywhere. And she was almost certain Cole didn't either. But wanting something and admitting it out loud were two different things. Cole came in an hour later, stamping snow off his boots. He'd taken his time with the horses, probably working through his own thoughts. They moved around each other in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the easy coordination they'd developed over months of practice. It wasn't until they were sitting at the table, eating in silence, that Cole finally spoke. "We should talk about the contract." Clara's heart stuttered. "All right. The original terms don't make sense anymore. We combined finances. We testified in court that this is a real marriage. We can't just—" He stopped, rubbed his face. "I don't know what I'm trying to say." "That things have changed," Clara offered quietly. "Yeah, they have." Cole met her eyes. "The question is what we do about it." Clara took a breath. This was it. The moment where she could either be honest or retreat back into safe pretense. And after everything they'd been through, after facing down Hale and testifying in court and fighting for this life together, pretending felt like the worst kind of cowardice. "I don't want to dissolve the marriage," she said. "In 8 months or ever. I want this to be real. If you do." The silence that followed felt like it lasted a year. Cole just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made him look 10 years younger. "If I do? Clara, I've wanted this to be real since about month 2. I just didn't think you did." "You didn't?" Clara laughed, the sound half relief, half disbelief. "Cole, I've been terrified you were counting down the days until you could be rid of me." "Rid of you?" He looked genuinely shocked. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, maybe ever. Why would I want to be rid of you?" "Because this started as business. Because you needed a wife on paper, not an actual partner." "I needed a wife on paper," Cole agreed. "What I got was someone who works harder than anyone I've ever met, who's smart and stubborn and refuses to back down from a fight, who makes this falling apart ranch feel like home." His voice went rough. "What I got was you, Clara, and I don't want to lose that." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You won't. You don't have to." "So we're doing this? Making it real? No contract, no end date, just marriage?" "Just marriage," Clara confirmed. "The messy, complicated, real kind." Cole stood, came around the table, and pulled her to her feet. His hands framed her face, gentle despite their calluses. "I love you. I should have said it in that courtroom, but I was too scared, so I'm saying it now. I love you, Clara Barrett. I love you too." The words felt like shedding weight she'd been carrying for months. "I think I have for a while. I was just too stubborn to admit it." Cole laughed, then kissed her. It wasn't their first kiss. They'd had that awkward peck at the wedding ceremony. But this was different. This was real and raw and full of months of unspoken feeling finally finding expression. When they broke apart, Clara was breathless and dizzy and happier than she'd ever been in her life. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we live our lives, build the ranch, fight, and make up and figure it out as we go." Cole's smile turned wry. "Fair warning, I'm not good at the romantic stuff. I'm going to mess this up sometimes." "Good. I'm not good at the demure wife stuff. I'm going to challenge you constantly." "Perfect. We'll be a disaster together." "The best kind of disaster," Clara agreed. They stayed up late that night, talking about everything they'd been holding back. Cole told her about his childhood, about why he'd really left his grandfather's ranch. Not just because of the old man's demands, but because of violence he'd witnessed, abuse he'd endured. About the years spent drifting, taking dangerous jobs because he didn't think he deserved better. Clara told him about her parents' deaths, about the suffocating expectations of being a woman in Pine Ridge, about teaching children while slowly dying inside from the smallness of her life, about the relief she'd felt when Tommy gambled everything away, because it meant she had an excuse to leave. I shouldn't have felt relieved, she admitted. That's terrible. It's human, Cole said. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are also the things that set us free. They fell asleep in Clara's room that night, no longer two strangers maintaining careful distance, but partners choosing to share a life in every sense of the word. The next morning, Clara woke to find Cole already up, working on something at the kitchen table. She patted out in her nightgown, curious. What are you doing? Burning the contract. Cole held up the document they'd signed in Pine Ridge 4 months ago. We don't need it anymore. Clara watched the paper catch fire, curl into ash. The words that had bound them together were gone, replaced by something much stronger than legal obligation. Choice, love, partnership freely given. Spring came early that year. By March, the snow had melted and the creek ran high with runoff. Clara planted her garden, the one she'd wanted to plant in the fall, and Cole helped her build proper beds and fencing to keep out deer. They worked together on the ranch, rebuilding what had fallen apart, making improvements, slowly transforming it from a collection of decrepit buildings into a real homestead. It was hard work, endless work, but it was theirs. News filtered in from Pine Ridge. The territorial investigation into Hale's land practices had uncovered even more fraud than they'd presented in court. Dozens of families were getting their properties back. Hale himself had fled to California ahead of criminal charges, leaving behind his empire in ruins. Sheriff Morrison had quietly resigned. His replacement was a man named Bill Carson, who'd lost his ranch to Hale's schemes 5 years ago and had no love for corruption. It's like the whole town's waking up, Clara said, reading the letter from Pine Ridge's new postmaster. People are actually talking about what Hale did, admitting they knew and did nothing because they were scared. Fear's a powerful thing, Cole said. Makes people into cowards, or survivors, depending on how you look at it. Clara thought about that. She'd been both. A coward when she'd accepted her lot in life without fighting, and a survivor when she'd finally chosen to resist. Maybe everyone was both, depending on the day and the stakes. In April, Tommy sent a letter from Denver. He'd been in the treatment program for 2 months, was attending meetings, was working as a clerk in a hardware store. He sounded tentative but hopeful. I don't know if I'll ever be the brother you deserved, he wrote, but I'm trying to be someone I can live with. That's a start. Clara wrote back, carefully. She couldn't forgive everything, couldn't forget the years of pain and disappointment, but she could acknowledge his effort, could leave the door open for something like reconciliation, even if it took years to build. Some wounds healed fast, others took time. That was just the nature of damage. By May, the ranch was thriving. They'd acquired more livestock, repaired the barn completely, even built a new chicken coop that actually housed chickens this time. Clara's garden was producing, and she was canning vegetables for winter. She was also teaching again, not in a formal school, but tutoring children from neighboring ranches who rode in twice a week for lessons. It wasn't the same as her old job, but it was better. She set her own curriculum, chose her own methods, answered to no one but herself and the parents who trusted her with their children's education. Cole watched her teach one afternoon, leaning in the doorway while Clara explained fractions using pie diagrams. When the students left, he was smiling. What? Clara asked, self-conscious. Nothing. Just, you're good at that, really good. Those kids actually understand what you're teaching. That's generally the goal of teaching. You know what I mean. Cole crossed the room, pulled her close. You light up when you teach, like you're doing exactly what you're meant to do. Clara leaned into him. I think I'm doing several things I'm meant to do. Teaching, ranching, being married to you. Turns out I'm capable of more than I thought. You were always capable of it. You just needed the space to figure it out. That was true, Clara realized. She hadn't changed fundamentally. She'd always been smart, stubborn, capable. But Pine Ridge had kept her small, kept her contained in a box labeled unmarried schoolteacher, with no room for anything else. Here, she could be all of herself. Teacher and rancher and wife and partner. Complex and messy and fully human. It was terrifying and exhausting and absolutely perfect. In June, they received an unexpected visitor. Judge Catherine Warren arrived in a fancy carriage, looking entirely out of place against the rough ranch backdrop. Your Honor, Cole said, surprised. What brings you all the way out here? Curiosity, primarily. Warren accepted Clara's offer of tea, settled at the kitchen table. I wanted to see how you were managing. And to tell you that Victor Hale was arrested in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. He's being extradited back to Wyoming to face charges. Clara felt a flutter of old fear, quickly suppressed. Will we have to testify again? Possibly, but the case is strong even without your testimony. Cartwright's evidence alone is damning. Warren sipped her tea. I also wanted to apologize. For what? Clara asked, confused. For not seeing what was happening in Pine Ridge sooner. I'm a territorial judge. I should have noticed the pattern of corruption, the irregularities in land transfers, but I didn't look closely enough. And people suffered because of my negligence. You couldn't have known, Cole said. Hale was careful. He covered his tracks. Until you two forced him into the open. Warren set down her cup. What you did took remarkable courage. Most people would have accepted Hale's offer, signed over the land, taken the money and run, but you fought back. And in doing so, you exposed corruption that had been festering for years. Clara shifted uncomfortably. We just wanted to keep our ranch. You wanted justice. There's a difference. Warren stood. I won't take up more of your time. I just wanted you to know that what you did mattered. Not just for yourselves, but for every family Hale victimized. You gave them their voice back. After she left, Clara sat on the porch and thought about that. They'd been fighting for survival, for their own future. But somehow their fight had become bigger than just them. Maybe that was how change really happened. Not through grand gestures or perfect heroes, but through ordinary people who got tired of being pushed around and decided to push back. She'd been ordinary her whole life. Unremarkable Clara Whitmore, spinster schoolteacher, invisible and powerless. But she'd found her power, found her voice. Found the strength to stand up and say no to a man who was used to hearing yes. That changed everything. July brought heat and afternoon thunderstorms and Clara's 23rd birthday. She'd almost forgotten about it until Cole surprised her with a new saddle, custom-made, fitted to her measurements, beautiful tooled leather. Cole, this is too much, she protested, running her hands over the smooth surface. It's exactly enough. You've been using my old saddle and complaining about it for months. Now you have your own. He smiled. Besides, partners should have equal equipment. Equal. That word again. Cole never let her forget that they were equals in this marriage, this partnership, this life, even when she forgot it herself. They rode out that afternoon, just the two of them, following the creek up into the mountains, found a meadow full of wildflowers, and had a picnic of bread and cheese and the first strawberries from Clara's garden. Can I ask you something? Claire said, lying in the grass beside Cole, watching clouds drift across the blue sky. Always. Do you ever regret it? The way we started? The contract and the business arrangement and all of it? Cole was quiet for a moment. No, because if it had started any other way, you might not have said yes. And I can't regret anything that brought you into my life. Even the parts where I was difficult? Especially those parts. Easy isn't interesting. He rolled onto his side, propped himself up on one elbow. Do you regret it? Clara considered. The fear, the uncertainty, the months of careful distance before they'd admitted how they really felt. The pain of leaving her old life behind, even though that life had been suffocating her. No, she said finally. I regret Tommy's choices. I regret Hale's cruelty. But I don't regret marrying you. Even when it was just a contract, it was the first choice I'd made in years that was really mine, that mattered. And now? Now it's the best choice I've ever made. Cole kissed her, soft and sweet, and Clara thought about how strange life was, how the worst moments could lead to the best ones, how losing everything could mean finding what you didn't know you needed. She'd been sold to pay a debt, married a stranger to escape a worse fate, fought corruption and testified in court and nearly lost everything. And somehow, through all of that, she'd found herself, found her strength, found a partner who saw her as an equal and loved her not despite her sharp edges, but because of them. That was worth more than any fairy tale romance, worth more than security or safety or any of the things she'd been taught to value above all else. This was real, messy and complicated and sometimes difficult, but real. And real was what she'd been searching for her whole life without knowing it. August brought more visitors, neighbors from surrounding ranches, coming to trade goods and share news. The Barretts' victory over Hale had made them something of local legends, and people wanted to meet the couple who'd taken down Pine Ridge's tyrant. Clara found it uncomfortable at first. She'd never wanted to be famous or celebrated, but Cole pointed out that their story gave hope to others who were facing their own struggles with powerful men and corrupt systems. Let them see that fighting back is possible, he said, that ordinary people can win against the odds. So Clara smiled and welcomed visitors and told her story when asked. Not the whole story, some parts were too private, too raw, but enough. Enough to show that resistance was possible, that women had power even when the world told them they didn't. One visitor was particularly unexpected. Mrs. Henderson, Clara's former landlady from Pine Ridge, arrived in September with an offer. "The school board wants you back," she announced without preamble. "They're willing to pay you $30 a month and give you free housing. They know they were wrong to let you go." Clara stared. $30 a month was 50% more than she'd made before. Free housing was unheard of for unmarried teachers, except she wasn't unmarried anymore. "I'm flattered," Clara said carefully, "but I'm not interested in returning to Pine Ridge. My life is here now." Mrs. Henderson looked around the ranch, the sturdy house, the productive garden, the livestock grazing in the distance. "You've done well for yourself, better than anyone expected." "Because people's expectations were pretty low," Clara said dryly. "That's true enough." Mrs. Henderson actually smiled. "Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands, but between you and me, I'm glad you're not coming back. You were too good for Pine Ridge, too big for it. We all saw that, even if we didn't want to admit it." After she left, Cole found Clara sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. "You all right?" he asked. "They want me back," Clara said. "Better pay, better conditions, everything I fought for when I was teaching there." And I don't want it." Clara looked at him. "Isn't that strange? 3 months ago I would have killed for that offer. Now it just feels like going backward." "It's not strange. You've grown past it." Cole sat beside her. "But if you want to accept, we could make it work. I could manage the ranch while you teach in town." "No." Clara was surprised by how certain she felt. "I don't want to teach for a school board that only values me now that I've proven I don't need them. I don't want to live in a town that stood by while Hale destroyed lives. I want this, us, the ranch. Teaching students who actually want to learn, not because it's compulsory, but because they're curious." "You're sure?" "Completely." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "I spent my whole life chasing approval from people who would never really see me. I'm done with that. I'd rather build something new than go back to something that never fit right in the first place." Cole kissed the top of her head. "Good, because I'd miss you like hell if you left." "I'm not leaving, not ever." And she meant it. October arrived with frost and turning leaves and the 1-year anniversary of the day Clara had married Cole Barrett in a rushed ceremony to escape Victor Hale's threats. They'd talked about celebrating it somehow, but when the day actually arrived, they were too busy with harvest preparations to do anything special. It wasn't until evening, sitting by the fire after a long day's work, that Clara realized what the date meant. "We made it," she said softly. Cole looked up from the accounts he was reviewing. "Made what?" "A year. The contract was for 1 year. Today's the day we would have dissolved the marriage, split the assets, gone our separate ways." Understanding crossed Cole's face. "So we did." They sat in silence for a moment, thinking about the people they'd been a year ago. Strangers bound by necessity, careful and wary, and so determined not to need each other. "I can't imagine it," Claire said. "Leaving, going somewhere else, being someone else." "Neither can I." Cole set aside the accounts, moved to sit beside her. "Turns out a year isn't long enough after all." "How long do you think we'll need?" "Forever, probably. Maybe longer." He smiled. "Think you can handle that?" Clara thought about the ranch, about the life they'd built together through sweat and stubbornness and refusing to give up, about teaching and ranching and fighting corrupt land barons, about all the moments, big and small, that had transformed a business arrangement into a real partnership, about love that had grown slowly, carefully, in the spaces between words and the quiet moments of shared work. "I think I can manage," she said. They didn't do anything dramatic to mark the anniversary, didn't renew vows or make grand declarations, just sat together by the fire, comfortable in the silence, secure in the knowledge that they'd chosen each other. Not because of contracts or necessity or fear, but because they wanted to. That choice, free and deliberate and entirely theirs, was worth more than any romantic gesture could ever be. Winter came again, and this time Clara was ready for it. The house was tight and warm, the barn stocked with hay, the root cellar full of preserved food. They'd learned from the previous year, planned better, prepared more thoroughly. On a night in late November, snow falling thick outside the windows, Cole and Clara sat at the kitchen table making plans for spring. What to plant, what repairs to tackle, how to expand the herd. "We should hire help," Clara said. "We can afford it now, and there's more work than two people can handle alone." "I was thinking the same thing," Cole made a note. "Maybe a couple of ranch hands, someone to help with the heavy labor. And I want to formalize the teaching, build a real schoolhouse on the property, make it official." Cole looked up, surprised but pleased. "That's a big project." "I know, but I'm tired of cramming students into the kitchen, and there are more families moving into the area every month. Their children need education." Clara met his eyes. "I want to build something that lasts, not just for us, but for the community." "Then we'll build it." Cole reached across the table, took her hand. "Whatever you need, we'll make it happen." That was partnership. Not just sharing a life, but building one together. Making decisions that considered both their dreams, both their strengths, both their goals. Clara had spent most of her life being told what she could and couldn't do, who she should and shouldn't be, where she belonged and where she didn't. Now she was writing her own rules, defining her own future, building a life that fit her instead of trying to squeeze herself into a life that never would. It wasn't easy. Some days were hard, physically exhausting, emotionally draining, full of setbacks and frustrations. But they were her days, lived on her terms, with a partner who valued her input and respected her autonomy. That made all the difference. In December, a letter arrived from Tommy. He'd been sober for 8 months, had saved enough money to rent a small apartment, was thinking about going to school to learn bookkeeping. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he wrote. "I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to be better than I was." Clara wrote back, carefully honest. "I can't forget what happened, but I can acknowledge your effort. Keep trying, Tommy. That's all any of us can do." She'd learned something important over the past year. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped, a decision made once and forgotten. It was a process. Sometimes slow, sometimes painful, always complicated. She might never fully forgive Tommy for gambling away her security and nearly destroying her future, but she could accept his apology, could wish him well in his recovery, could leave space for something like reconciliation, even if it took years to build. That was growth, too. Learning to hold multiple truths at once, anger and compassion, hurt and hope, boundaries and openness. Christmas came quietly. Clara and Cole exchanged small gifts, practical things, mostly, though Cole surprised her with a set of books she'd mentioned wanting months ago. They spent the day working side by side, then shared a simple meal and went to bed early. It wasn't romantic or dramatic or anything like the Christmas celebrations Clara remembered from childhood, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. As the year turned and 1888 began, Clara found herself reflecting on everything that had changed. A year ago, she'd been a terrified woman entering a marriage with a stranger, gambling everything on a contract and a desperate hope that it might lead somewhere better. Now she was a rancher, a teacher, a wife, a partner. She was someone who'd faced down corruption and won. Someone who'd found her voice and refused to surrender it. Someone who'd built a life from scratch and kept building, kept growing, kept becoming more herself every day. She'd learned that power didn't come from being the strongest or the richest or the most connected. It came from knowing who you were and refusing to compromise that for anyone's comfort. She'd learned that love, real love, wasn't about perfection or ease or fairy tale romance. It was about choosing someone every day, working through problems together, respecting each other enough to fight fair and make up honestly. She'd learned that home wasn't a place you found, but something you built, with effort and intention, and a stubborn refusal to settle for anything less than what you deserved. Most importantly, she'd learned that she was capable of far more than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. That knowledge changed everything. One evening in late January, Clara stood on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Cole came out to join her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How strange life is." Clara leaned into him. "A year and a half ago, I was teaching school in Pine Ridge, convinced that was all I'd ever be. Now I'm here, with you, living a life I didn't even know was possible. Regrets? Not even one." Clara turned to face him. "I used to think freedom meant being left alone, making my own choices in isolation, but that's not what it is at all." "No? No. Real freedom is having someone who sees all of you, the good and the bad and the complicated, and chooses you anyway. Who builds a life with you instead of around you, who makes you better without trying to change who you are." She touched his face gently. "That's what you gave me, Cole. Not just escape from Hale, but space to become myself." Cole's expression was soft, open in a way it rarely was. "You gave me the same thing, a reason to stop running, a reason to build instead of just survive, a partner instead of just a wife." They stood together in the fading light, two people who'd started as strangers in a desperate bargain and become something neither had planned for, something better than they'd imagined. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow and pine. Inside, the fire crackled warm. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The world turned, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs, but Clara didn't mind. She'd found her place in it, found her strength, found a partner who matched her stubborn streak with his own and loved her not despite it, but because of it. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Clara Barrett, born Clara Whitmore, former schoolteacher, current rancher, and teacher and wife, smiled at her husband and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because fate or destiny had led her here, but because she'd chosen it, had fought for it, had refused to accept the life others tried to force on her and built her own instead. In the unforgiving frontier, they'd built something rare and precious, a life earned through sweat and stubbornness, a partnership forged in necessity and refined into genuine love, a home that was theirs completely, won through courage and determination and an absolute refusal to surrender. The price of a life, it turned out, wasn't measured in dollars or debts or contracts. It was measured in choices, in standing up when it would have been easier to stay down, in fighting back when everyone expected you to submit, in believing you deserved better and refusing to accept anything less. Claire had paid that price, had earned her freedom not by escaping one cage for another, but by breaking free completely and building something new, and she would never, ever take it for granted. "Come on," Cole said, tugging her toward the door. "It's getting cold." Clara followed him inside, into the warmth and light, into the life they'd built together from nothing but determination and hope. Behind them, the door closed against the winter night. Ahead, the future stretched out uncertain but full of possibility. And Clara Barrett walked into it with her head high, her hand in her partner's, an absolute confidence that whatever came next, they would face it together. Equal, unbreakable, free.